So you just destroyed my body as being a gift to me from the Creator.
My friend thinks it's a prison.
Anything I born into a delusion.
Anything I create is a fractal of my delusion.
Tony, your body's a gift to everybody.
That period is
Like
sure,
mine.
that period.
I've got lots of gravity mass here.
Yeah, we can just move forward from that. Yeah, we're good.
Just remember, my body's a gift to all of you.
No, man. That's a great call. That's a great quote.
That was a
like
great. I wish y'all had been there.
When was that?
That was a great time.
How long ago was that, Chet?
It's been about a year, hasn't it, Alexei?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, right.
It's been about a year ago.
Okay.
Yep.
And I was trying to come up with a new intro, and I just thought, oh, I need to grab that clip. It'll be fun. But we are here tonight for Grant Lavac. How are you, Grant?
Hello. I'm good. Thanks for having me on, Tony. It's great to. I'm always keen to have a chat with anyone that's interested to talk all things UAP and what's happening down under. So yeah, appreciate you having me on, man. And it's good to be with you, Brad, again. Obviously, my brother from another mother, and Alexei, good to see you. So. But Tony, I have to say at the front end, I don't know if your listeners, you probably mentioned this before, but it probably bears repeating. Just for me to say congrats to both you guys, because I saw Kurt Jamungal put out a nice little clip yesterday or earlier today, kind of profiling all of the honorable mentions. So, congrats to you both for the hard work and effort you put into to get a notable mention. So very cool.
Thanks, Grant.
Yeah, I was actually going to mention that. I saw that too. I think it's pretty cool what Kurt's doing there.
Yeah, man, hit me right in the chakra. You know what I mean? Got me.
Which one?
I just felt really well treated. It made me want to be good to somebody else. You know what I mean? It's just like super, such a good dude, man.
You would think Kurt's spiritual or something.
I don't know, man. He's saving it up. If there's karma, I mean, we should ask Alexei, but. I mean, he's banking some serious karma. Anything I ever do that guy, just let me know. I'll do it.
Yeah, that is awesome. When he agreed to come on PiFi, I was like, man, this guy is very, benevolent. Because I'm just some carpenter from Tennessee, and I mean, it's kind of awesome. I love the way everybody just kind of comes and we have a good time and talk, and for me, it's a lot. I'm on this, this learning trick through life, and I just want to talk to people and understand what they're saying, and I find I can learn from people a lot easier if I'm talking directly to them instead of listening to a lecture. So Grant, if you don't mind, tell us a little bit about yourself.
About me, well, I'm only child, so don't hold that against me, but I live in Melbourne with my wife and my young one, a 3-year-old. And I work in the tech industry, so work with non-profit organizations in the software space to kind of help elevate board performance, help organizations become more equitable, successful, sustainable, and so on. And I guess I've had a fascination for what we're all interested in, the UAP, UFO topic since I was a young fella, a boy, and then growing up as a teen, every Wednesday night, 9 p.m., kind of watch the X-Files. But it wasn't until kind of December 2017 when the New York Times articles came out that it really reinvigorated my interest on the topic. And throughout COVID, I was just kind of became a sponge and just tried to watch and read and listen and learn as much as I could on the topic. And it made me beg the question, well, with everything that's going on in the US and US Congress taking this so seriously, well, what is Australia doing about UAP? And so that kind of became and has ever since been my mission to get to the bottom of why Australia has such a disinterest for this topic. And not just Australia, other Five Eyes partners as well, like the UK, New Zealand. The only two countries that really seem to be taking this issue seriously is both the US and Canada. Despite other countries, the UK has a long history of investigating this, as does Australia. France has done some investigation on it in the past. We know Brazil has as well. So that's really my driving force, is to kind of figure out, well, what the hell is Australia doing about UAPs?
What do you guys think about that?
Continue to try and find answers.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that you got interested in 2017, and just the other day I was getting ready to type something that was, I don't know, there's a lot of new people, right, that have come on board and just now really thinking about this, and so they're posting old UFO videos, and I was getting kind of impatient with that, and then I thought, I need to be more patient because a lot of people are just now becoming interested, and they're going back and they're looking at the history and they're saying, hey, look at this one. And those of us who've been involved with this our whole lives tend to be like, I started to say, dude, that's an old video, but I just kind of held back, and I thought I need to be
you gotta let them take their journey, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
And I realized I had to be.
Yeah, it didn't just start in 2004, like a lot of people still think it probably did, that are new to the topic. So it's gone back, 75 years for folks that have been following this very closely. You got in Australia, there's some, I just stand on the shoulder of giants. There's some Australian researchers, guys like Keith Basterfield, Bill Chalker, Paul Dean, and newer players to the game, Ross Coulthard. These guys have been investing a good chunk of their life and hours into researching this topic, which goes back, to 1945 and even earlier from that. So for a lot of new people that are just catching up, I think the 60 Minutes expose that was done last year probably was a really good introduction for a lot of people. But that really started from looking at the 2004 Nimitz case and then onwards. But, there's so much more valuable information from years past as well.
Did you all see the Joe Rogan Eric Weinstein event, the 4-hour long?
I
finally
got
it
through
twice
this morning.
I watched it twice.
I thought if it was okay, I'd play. I had a little clip queued up for you two in honor of Brad and Alexei, and if you don't mind, I thought I might play it. If you don't mind,
it's like a fart sound or something silly.
No, it's pretty short. I didn't want to, I can't play too much of it, I guess, because of copyright issues.
No, it's fair use, man. Use it. Yeah.
Well, I don't have all the little disclaimers like most people have on the. Let's see. I gotta screen share first.
I lift people's audio routinely, and I'll say I'm doing this without permission. It's fair use, just so. Because if it goes sideways and they're like, oh, I didn't endorse that. I just want to say, like, right off the bat, they don't endorse it. I'm like, if you know them, just ask them, see if it's cool.
Let's see.
But that's what I love about your podcast, Brad, because you played like a good 30 minutes from Aliens when you're doing the colonist bit, and that was awesome. I was like, oh man, it's taking me back watching that movie all over again.
Drake, we are leaving.
Let me see if I got this. Let me see if I got this in the right spot.
Yeah, that was that story time? That was the exoplanet Earth, right? Yeah. Or maybe, it was cool. That was a fun one. Yeah. Somebody's like, that's a lot of aliens. I'm like, what are you talking about, man? What do you mean
shaking bag quality?
Shaking.
You must not be able to hear it because y'all are talking.
No, yeah, we can't hear the audio.
Oh, that's what it was. I forgot to cue the audio. I knew something was wrong. Why do they don't just make that automatic? I don't know. Let's try that. Oddly enough, it was queued. I wonder if I'm. Shoot! Don't tell me I'm gonna have a. Oh, I get it. I'm gonna click it again. Okay. All right, here we go.
We're good, man. I got all night. Ashley's gone. The house is all
gravity, but the rest of us have to stay in our lane. Well, that ends now. Now that I've been contacted by people saying, Eric, Sam Harris and I were both contacted saying that there's a disclosure planned and there's big updates and we need you to communicate this news to the world.
There's disclosure about a specific technology.
About something. I mean, more or less the way this works, it doesn't matter who you talk to. Something's huge. I can't talk to you about it because you don't have clearance. But we're going to fly out to Colorado Springs and we're going to show you some stuff and you're never going to be the same. Right? Like, okay, I'm on standby. My process, Joe, is that I'm very open-minded, but I have a very strong filter before I'll say, yeah, that's true. That's real.
Okay.
That freaks people out. It's like, why are you even talking to these people? Well, because I know the history and you don't. So
let me pause right there just for a second. Have you guys heard him that strongly before say that he had been contacted that way about disclosure? I mean, that in
No,
fact,
it was all news to me. I'm
a huge
fan of him.
Yeah, I've heard him say once before that he has been contacted on previous occasions, but it's always the same story that at the last minute they cancel or it gets deferred or put off. So I had heard him say that once before because I think he was on a podcast with he was on an episode with Jesse Michaels and Hal Putoff, and I think he talked about it during that show. But yeah, I mean that's the strongest language I've heard him use to that degree on that point.
I think I saw that one.
Let me go back just a little bit further. I missed the part that I thought was funny that I wanted to show Alexei, and you might have seen this.
And top drawer physics that the rest of us are not allowed to participate. So if you want a weird model for how physics works, think about diplomatic immunity, but in science. You've got this group of people at the top who are allowed to engage in quackery. They can hang out at Esalen and smoke dope and take LSD and go into sensory deprivation tanks like Feynman. They can pal around with rich people who are talking about anti-gravity. But the rest of us have to stay in our lane.
So that was the part I wanted to play in honor of Alexei and Brad. Because I remember when I first met Alexei, I was thinking, you know what, Alexei, you're the type of person that would be exactly the type of person to be told stay in a lane, right? And same with you, Brad. Do either of you have a comment about that?
Well, I can say that the trouble with and the reason that they can do that and essentially strangle, sort of the scientific freedom and autonomy of people in that community is because they can ostracize you. They know the people who sign off on who gets to publish and all that stuff. And if you step out of line, then stepping out of line, that they're going to hit you right in the lunchbox. You know what I mean? You're not going to be able to publish. It's going to damage your career. People won't listen to you. And so for the scientific community, it's a legit concern. And when they come out against people like me or Alexei or something like that, in some ways they're toeing the party line because it will keep them in good stead. So I get that. I completely understand the need for the little people or for the you're not big and famous, if you're not a Neil deGrasse Tyson or you're not somebody who doesn't need approval from the rest of the scientific community, you don't have the autonomy to do what you think is right, to do what you want to do. There are some lines you just can't cross or it's going to damage your career. The luxury that I have is that I'm a retired military. I mean, I got my income is undiminished by anybody's opinion of me. So I can do whatever I want. You know what I mean? I can say whatever I want. I can research whatever I want. I can learn whatever I feel like. And I'm fearless because I'm in a position where nobody runs me. Nobody can muzzle me.
But at the same time, you don't get the same opportunities either.
It's true.
Right.
I mean, yeah, I won't get invited to do that.
The system, and this is one problem I have with government being in control of the grant, how science gets funded, because they also control who gets a voice to a certain extent. And one of my question is, and for you, Alexei, how do current day physicists get challenged if they're all they're basically in an echo chamber to a certain extent? I mean, they have their little offshoot little theories, but none that really challenge the status quo, right?
Yeah, no, I would say that they're not being challenged, or I mean, maybe they are being challenged, but it's like a test. Do exactly what we want you to do, kind of thing. Don't think outside the box. That's the 100% the reason why I do work alone and have been working alone since 2012 easily, if not before that, working on my own theories and all that kind of stuff. And the last meeting I went to was not the last meeting I went to, but I went to a meeting rather recently, and it was called Space Advisors, and launching satellites into space and things like that. And I straight up said, "What about electrogravitics? Why can't we just use that?" And the people just looked at me with a blank stare, like, "What are you talking about? Electrogravitics? What is?" They just blank stare. And then I told them about 5D physics, blank stare, smirks. So when it comes to getting funding or even contributing to a meeting, you're going to be laughed at and smirked at if you're bringing up these concepts that aren't like always used. So
yeah,
I'll work on myself.
I'll tell you the reason that we were talking a little bit earlier about how Grant got into the thing when he was, just a lad, and it was a wee lad. I guess I don't know if that's
yeah, you're right. That's accurate. Yeah,
it's Irish. It's Scottish.
Yeah, it's Irish. That's what I was thinking. I am Irish, so
a little fella.
Me too.
Yeah, a little fella. So anyway, yeah. So, but like in 2021, when in May or whatever, when the Navy said, yeah, that happened, and there's these triangles floating across like the deck of whatever that battleship was or whatever, I was just like, all right, man, I got to figure this out, and so that's what I started doing, is I podcasted about it, and I was like, okay, they fly massless. What causes mass? It's the Higgs field. How can we get a hold of the Higgs field? It's the left-handed electron. How do I get left-handed electrons past magnetic field through graphene or a hexagonal molecular structure and oscillate it? And if the Higgs field is negative energy density and we can put positive energy into the left-handed electron that the Higgs field's hanging on to, maybe we can drop the Higgs field to zero, to the ground state, and that's anti-gravity. That's pretty much as simple as it can get. And it took me, once I started figuring it out, probably took me a couple days to figure that out. And so that's my theory of anti-gravity. I've been podcasting about it ever since. And a lot of times, these physicists or whatever, they'll be like, oh, it's crap, whatever. And I'm like, okay, what's the matter? They're like, well, how do you know that you're holding on to the Higgs field? How do you know that the left-hand electron is like, well, Dr. O'Dowd said right here that it does that. Well, if you oscillate that electron, how do you know that's putting energy in the Higgs field? Well, it's Newton's third law. Every action is the equal and opposite reaction, right? So the energy can't destroy it. It's got to go somewhere. It's going in the Higgs field because the Higgs field's holding on. And so and I just had a NASA physicist like DM me, and I sent him the stuff, and we had this kind of back and forth, and he's like, oh, well, how do you prove that? And I'm like, dude, look, I'm just going to take Dr. O'Dowd's word for it. So it's either stuff that I'm relying on that's like legit research in physics, or it's first principles. And the only thing that's in that whole mix of when it comes to anti-gravity is negative energy density of the Higgs field. Is the Higgs field negative, not positive vacuum expectation value? Because if it's negative, then my theory of anti-gravity is the theory of anti-gravity, and that's a fact, and that's it. If it's not, then I'm just as wrong as everybody else.
Did you all also see the newest thing from Corbell with his statement, his emphatic statement?
I didn't see before we move on to that next statement, I wanted to speak on the first thing that Weinstein said, which was how there's the two different groups, basically. And I've been told two different things, basically. One or three different things. I'm surprised you're not dead yet, number one.
Who, me?
Too damn smart, number two. And the third one is you're on the wrong side of the fence.
Who, me?
So I've been told those things by, people up in the military and stuff like that.
Really? Somebody told you that?
Yeah. Yeah, but Black Project kind of like projects. Yeah.
See, that will set off my PTSD. Well, part of the reason that I just put it on blast is because I want it to be too late to kill me. You know what I mean? Like now,
I told them I walk the fence.
Yeah, like, if you took me out right now, that would give people would be like, dude, what was he talking about before they killed him? You know what I mean?
Got a martyrism right there. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying, I know that's crazy, even though it's something I really worry about, I admit, but it's you know, and I'll say to myself, okay, is my heart elevated? Okay. Do I feel like somebody's gonna die? Okay. So now I know, okay, that's how I'm self-aware. My PTSD, when my cowboy starts to ride, and I've podcasted about what PTSD does to me, and you know, that kind of stuff. Like being self-aware that that's happening helps me kind of rein it in. But no, legit, man, like for real, like part of the reason that I'm just like, hey, fuck, I'm gonna tell everybody whatever it is, I think, because I just wanted to, I guess I know it's kind of nutty, but in the back of my head, I'm like, you know, I just, you know, I want it to be more trouble for something bad to happen to me than, you know, I'd rather have people go, okay, it's just going to be easier to just kind of put out information and say he's crazy instead of like actually, you know, I don't know.
Well, I think that's when they switched over to Havana Syndrome now. But like on the first podcast, I think it was the very first one I ever did with Artisan. You know, I was like, I'm going to get you into trouble because I'm talking about real freedom here. You know, freedom of this suppressed knowledge. Like, we need to get this knowledge out to the world. That's my goal. Like, that's what I'm doing in life because it's the human condition, in my opinion.
I'm certainly not seen as a threat, you know, academically. So I wasn't that concerned about it. The reason I started to bring up Corbell was because in his little recent thing, again, emphatically saying, I have been, you know, I wanted to play the clip, but at one point in the clip, he says, you know, we're talking about material science where on the atomic level, it's layered, you know, materials in a non-gravity, you know, he's talking about science in a way that I've never heard him talk before, almost as if he does know something. And of course, a lot of people don't like Corbell, but I mean, these guys they're either telling the biggest lie in history or they're telling the truth, right?
What did he say about layers? What was that?
I was going to try to find it right quick. He was basically saying that he's basically been not read indirectly, but he knows about indirectly knows about the process. And I need to play it again so I don't misquote him. But the layering of material on an atomic level in a gravity-free environment. That's where that's where those anti-gravity materials have to be manufactured in that type of environment. So, I mean,
you want to know what he's talking about? You want me to tell you what he's talking about? I'll tell you what he's talking about. You see up on that right there? See, that's the Vag Mark IV right there. You see that? What it is it's a Faraday disc, and it's got two Faraday discs. One is a constant field, and one's like a harmonically sort of excited field. Now, what he's talking about is, you'll see if you catch that tweet where I was talking to that NASA scientist, when the key is the left-handed electron. And if you pass a magnetic field, and that Faraday disc makes a magnetic field that goes like this. Like, here's the disc, it blows through the disc, it goes back around, comes back this way. And when that magnetic field passes through a hexagonal molecular structure, like like graphene, right? It teases out left and right-handed layers or something. This is what he says in his research. This is Dr. Lawrence Eves at the University of Nottingham. This is 9 years ago. He passed a magnetic field through a perpendicular through graphene, and he thinks it's the hexagonal molecular structure that teases out these left-handed electrons, and they sit there in these cyclotronic orbits in the field in what they call Landau energy levels. And the reason, when he talked about, if that's what he was saying, if Jeremy Corbell was saying that it's this mono, like one atom thick layers, right, of this material, I guarantee you that material is bismuth, magnesium, zinc, or graphene, or any other material composition that is similarly of a hexagonal molecular structure. That's how you know what I'm talking about is exactly right, because they're talking, and you can see if you look up at the Vag, there's what I call the amp. Above the Vag, there's like a silver plate. That's not one molecule or one atom thick. It's plates of magnesium sandwiching plates of graphene. And so That's when you're doing it on your kitchen table and you're just a fucking regular weirdo who's trying to make anti-gravity. That's what I call it an amp. In the patent, I call it a anti-gravity amp. It's you pass that field through that material, and that's what pumps out those electrons and fills your magnetic field with the left-handed electrons that you need to excite with a harmonic. Because like once I catch them in that field, like Dr. Eve says, the other channel of the oscilloscope is pumping it with a little electric pulse, and it goes up, 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 up. You get that harmonic pulse, and then it's like pushing somebody on a swing. I think the frequency is about a kilohertz. It's the same frequency of a gravity wave. And if you pump 1,000 times a second, right? The idea is that if the Higgs field is the gravity field, and the Higgs field is holding on to those left-handed electrons, and the left-handed electrons are spinning around in these cyclotronic orbits full up in that magnetic field, and then you start pumping them. If you can, it's like pushing a kid on a swing. If you push and the swing goes out and comes back and you push at the exact right time, you start building energy in essentially the Higgs field. And if you build up enough positive energy in the field, and the Higgs field is negative energy density, you put enough positive energy in there, you drop it to zero, you drop the Higgs to the ground state, and then you have anti-gravity. Because
let me play this. Let me play this clip for a little bit.
Have the luxury of disbelief about this. You know, it is my job to speak with people in different levels of government and the military and pilots. And, you know, look, man, I don't have the luxury of disbelief. I know for certain, and it has been proved to me beyond a shadow of a doubt, that we have full intact craft and machines that we've been trying to reverse engineer. And I'll just say it, man, these machines, they're not from here. Whoever built these appear to be a non-human intelligence. Now, where they're from, because the word extraterrestrial means just not from Earth, but also the word alien. You know, what is alien? Alien is anything that is alien to us, right? So I know for certain that there have been limited comms or communications with whoever these builders, we'll just call them occupants or builders of these craft are. Now, are we being told the truth when we've had these comms with these builders or occupants, right? And that I have no idea. How could I possibly know?
So I was trying to divide these clips up into little segments, so you know it wouldn't be like carte blanche. But if you all talk about that for a second, and I'll find the clip where he says about the layering and that kind of thing.
Yeah. So I think when he talks about the layering, what he's talking about, or I don't even know if he knows what it is, but I'm predicting, right, that. And if you actually, I did an episode called, I sent a lot of my episodes, but there's one called Cattle Mutilation 101. And they talk about sandwiching. And I actually lifted Kurt Jaimungal's audio. It's got Ross Coulthard in it. I also lifted his interview of Linda Moulton Howe, because Linda Moulton Howe said that it's a bismuth, magnesium, zinc layered compound that she was like signing out to people to study because she got her hands on some recovered metal. So I know for a fact, like there's no way that Linda Moulton Howe is signing out this kind of material. And Hal Puthoff has looked at it. She said Hal Puthoff looked at it, and I've heard it in other ways too. And then I found this research, and it was all about graphene. And I was like, well, let me look at what this hexagonal, what the molecular structure of graphene is a hexagon. That's what Dr. Eve said was important. And so I'm like, well, let me check and see what the molecular structure of bismuth is. And I'm like, oh, look, it's a hexagon. And then what's the magnesium, structure? Oh, look, it's a hexagon too. And then what's zinc? Oh, yep, hexagon. So there's no question in my mind. There's just no way for that to be. There's no way for that to be a coincidence. So it's real, and that's that's one of the reasons I know for certain that that the anti-gravity that I've achieved when the needle swung like 2.5 pounds. I'm like, it's legit anti-gravity, and I got that as soon as I started putting what I call an amp, that graphene into the construction, and. So that's for sure. The one thing though, the misnomer, I did an episode called Quantum Fallout. UFOs, UAPs, and Quantum Fallout, Part 1. And in it, there's a discussion, and I lifted audio again of Gary Nolan, and he talks about the isotope ratios of this magnesium. And what he says is that the isotope ratios in the recovered craft, in the metal of the recovered craft, they're off. They're not normal. And it's like 11. There's isotopes. An isotope of, like, say, magnesium comes in 24, 25, and 26. And that means you have atoms of magnesium that are stable, not radioactive. They have 24 neutrons, 25 neutrons, and 26 neutrons. And then there's, like, I can't remember what's magnesium on the periodic table. I don't remember. Anyway, so it's got a certain number of protons, but it could have 26 neutrons, 24, 25, or 26 neutrons. And in nature, anytime you mine regular magnesium, it's like 80% of it is going to be 24, 11% is 25, and like 9% is 26. And he goes, it's going to be in that ratio anywhere in the universe when you mine, or at least anywhere in the solar system. And he goes, but when they recovered and tested the craft, it was like 60, 20, and 10, right? It was like 60, 24, and then 20% was 25, and then 10% was 26. And I'm like, and he didn't catch this. And I was like, dude, the difference between 18, 11, and 9 and 60, 20, and 10 is 60 and 20 and 10 only adds up to 90%, right? 80, 11, and 9, that's 100% of the magnesium. So what that means is that 10% of that magnesium is radioactive and decaying, right? And the reason I think it's radioactive and decaying, and so you'll get, like, you got guys like Nolan and other people that are like, oh, this is like alien manufacture, and there's no way they could get this and all that. But the reason that it's 10% radioactive, which is, and I don't know if Nolan figured that out or realized it, but that's why all those CIA agents or whoever's the scientists that are observing or playing with those craft components, that's why they're getting sick. They're getting cancer and dying because they're playing with radioactive stuff. And so they're getting what's that?
Let me play this clip right quick. This
Sure.
is the part where and then I want to hear from Grant on not necessarily the science of it, but I want you to speak to the believability of this. Because I want to hear your take too, Grant. Let's see if I can pull this up right quick. And I'll make sure I have the sound playing. Press the little play button. Here we go.
Now, the reason for the secrecy, dude, this is like so obvious once you really grasp it. It's so simple. This technology can be weaponized. We're talking about weapons of mass destruction. The actual propulsion system in these craft are gravitational. If anybody can catch up with the material science to making these materials, which you would need atomic layering in a zero gravity environment. If we were,
I put my little AI art in there to give me some breaks to have conversation. But what do you? I mean, you heard what he said. I guess he didn't say as much as I imagine he said there. But I mean, this whole thing about. I mean, again, is this a huge lie, or is he? I mean, how big of a lie can he tell? Grant, I was asking you.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, I think if you look back, if it is true that the US government has run a successful crash retrieval program for 75 plus years, dating back to whether it be Trinity or Roswell, and if you believe what folks like Eric W. Davis and others say, that everything is so stovepiped and compartmentalized that they've really not had any success understanding this technology. They've had to shelve it once every couple of years or a decade because they don't have enough of a understanding, or they don't have technology that can assist their understanding. My whole take is, well, the advancement of so science and technology is best furthered with collaboration. So is this compartmentalization approach the downfall of a lot of the understanding behind this so-called technology? I mean, how does science benefit from compartmentalization? It's clearly not on this particular topic. If what we hear to be true is that, well, they don't understand the technology because person A only looks at data A and person B only looks at data B. They don't collaborate. There's no open sourced approach. They're not having scientists talk to other scientists. Everything is so stovepiped and compartmentalized. And so that's what my whole kind of beef is. Well, if they've compartmentalized everything in the interest of national security, fair enough, but surely there has to be able to be a balance between national security interests and also the betterment of humanity and advancing science and technology and bringing a much broader inclusiveness of science and academia into the conversation. Because if there's no collaboration, I mean, look at what CERN has been able to do. They built the Large Hadron Collider. CERN has 12,000 people working collectively with CERN, and their whole approach is collaboration, openness. They open source their data. They have people scrutinize, analyze it, and look at the things that they're able to, not just necessarily achieve, but research and study. So wouldn't the approach be much more effective if it was more open to a degree where you can still have, top security clearances around it, but you bring in more people that can offer, their perspective or scientific, bring their scientific acumen on it and so on. I don't see how compartmentalization has worked for the US government if they have had these successful crash retrieval programs and they've got this technology that they don't understand. So yeah, that's probably my take on where compartmentalization is probably falling, has fallen over and not furthered their understanding of the technology.
I guess my question is really what I'm trying to get to is for my own personal needs. And Alexei, maybe you can make a comment about this. I just had Mick West on, right? And he's kind of gotten me back into the skeptic mode again. And I've always been kind of a skeptic, and I don't think we've had disclosure. But what are we to expect? I mean, how can we get? I guess there will be no answer to my question. There's not going to be anything that anybody can say, whether it's Eric Weinstein or Jeremy Corbell. None of these people are ever going to be able to convince the true skeptics like Mick West, right? With just by saying, right?
No, you'll never be able to convince people by just saying things. And then what I was going to say is he said something about a zero gravity manufacturing. We have that. We have zero gravity facilities. I mean, the International Space Station is a zero gravity facility. So to think that we don't have the capability to make a zero gravity environment where you can do like a deposition or something like that, or sputtering or whatever you want to call it, I don't buy that. I mean, I think we can.
You just have to probably need a little bit bigger facility in space, right? Some room to manufacture well, I guess you could do assembly outside the
right. Well, you just make part by part.
Yeah.
Right? And then you put the parts together.
I think that's bullshit. I don't see any need for. I mean, I don't want to say that I think that's bullshit.
Well,
that's my inner voice saying. But I don't. I would be really curious as to why it would need to be like in zero gravity. You know what I mean? Like I think you gold plate something. Like I think you could use electrolysis to, layer the, those atoms. Real graphene is only one atom thick anyway. We can do that. They do that with Scotch tape.
I mean, the thing is, we still have. You can't really escape gravity as long as you're in a solar system or a galaxy or a right.
That's true.
There's
100%. You're still swinging around. There's vacuum expectation value negative.
Maybe there's less of it, but I've literally seen videos of where scientists are manipulating atoms, right? they've made little letters out of them and puzzles and right. So
Yeah.
I guess I wasn't going to that point so much as, and I'm trying to ask the question of how do we get, maybe I should be asking, I won't be able to do this, but maybe I should be asking Corbell, don't you understand that all of you have all of these smart people in the world that also need more evidence or, of your claims? Do they really think that we're just going to say, okay,
Well,
you said
I'd say what stuck out of my mind is,
why not just show us the evidence that he's seen?
well, he said earlier, and I need to play that part, but he was basically saying that he was concerned about our enemies getting a hold of the technology, which I think is an excuse, because you can easily, right? Just because you show the shape of something, a sphere. I mean, how many? What's a sphere going to show your enemies as far as technology?
there are two things that he said that I found extremely credible, which makes me think, okay, at least he's been shown something. And I feel like at least in two places, he's been shown something that's true, and he's accurately like conveying it. And the one thing is that it's simple. The reason that everything's so hush hush, in my opinion, is because it's simple. If it's simple enough for me to figure out, it's simple. I'm telling you, anti-gravity is almost as simple as an airfoil cambering a wing to create lift, which is what the Wright brothers figured out we need for flight.
Almost
that simple. Yeah, man. It's so simple that I think it's scary that anybody can do this. Like, I think I did it on my kitchen table. And the other thing he said that was I think rung very true, at least for me, is the layering of the hexagonal molecular structure of it's what I call the anti-gravity amp, which is what Dr. Lawrence Eves said. You pass that magnetic field through that hexagonal molecular structure and you tease out all those left-handed electrons. This is what we need to shake for anti-gravity. And they're talking about layering 1 atom thick, essentially this metal compound that when you pass the magnetic field through it, it will give you that high concentration of left-handed electrons, which is what you need to excite for anti-gravity. So the fact that he's talking about layering material, and the fact that he's talking about how it's so simple is why it's kept a secret, then I find it truthful. At least Brad, it's on all fours with what I think.
What do you think? So each hexagon is basically made from a different material. They have different sizes, right? Just based off of the atomic structure.
Well, so I think what they're talking about is like a graphene is a hexagonal lattice of carbon.
Right. One layer thick, but it has.
So they layer carbon.
It has a radius, though.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I'm wondering if the radii get bigger and then get smaller, then get bigger. Then I wonder if there's a shape to the radius and how it layers.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
That is interesting. I mean, that's definitely, to me, that would be a very fruitful experiment.
You get what I'm saying there?
Yeah. I don't know, man. But it sounds like would you want it to go little bigger, little, like at each layer, or would you want it to go,
big?
Looks to me like a graphene. I kind of see now why you were talking about the 2D hologram, because graphene would be a great material. Look how flat it is on a molecular.
Yeah. Like real legit graphene is like 1 atom thick. The graphene I have is like a micron thick. It's like, that's the cheap stuff that still costs like $250 for like 10 sheets.
You can't get it. You can't get it 1 atom thick. I'm just kidding.
No, I can't afford it 1 atom thick. That's for sure.
I mean, I think use tape.
But the reason we don't have disclosure, I mean, like one of the reasons I think that,
was I screen sharing just then?
I didn't see it.
Oh, darn it! I meant to. I was just going to show the viewers. I was going to show the viewers.
That's graphene.
Yeah, that's what I meant by it would be easy to. It seems like it'd be easy to manipulate that into a flat matrices or whatever of material. layering it, you know.
And so that's why, and so bismuth, zinc, magnesium, they have the same, they can, you know, they can layer that material in the same lattice. And so what you'd, and at least the material that Linda Moulton Ho was handing around that she said she'd recovered from an actual craft, like structure, or somebody gave it to her, was essentially a bismuth, magnesium, zinc sandwich, you know, and it was just like, it just repeated over and over and over and over. And so
also, wouldn't it seems like gravity might assist you in a little bit when you're trying to stack things? It would be nice to be able to say, okay, here's this layer. Stay right there. You stay right there instead of floating.
Yeah, and that's kind of why I said it was. That's why I said I thought it was BS. I'm sorry.
Well, maybe maybe what he's saying is trying to throw off. You know, I don't know. Maybe that's part of the game.
I think so. You gotta be careful. Yeah, I think there's a lot of that, and he wouldn't know the difference. That's the thing. He wouldn't know. He'll believe whatever anybody tells him, right? So, I mean, you definitely see. I think disclosure is only going to happen when we're going to figure it out anyway. You know what I mean? Like, that's why I'm less interested in what the government has to tell me, and I'm more interested in just figuring it out myself. You know what I mean?
The problem
that's what I found.
I'm sorry, Grant. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, coming back to the Eric Weinstein interview, that's what I found interesting about what he was saying, that he found it perplexing that there were no folks that spoke his language, physics language. There are no physicists that were seemingly looking at the UFO issue. I mean, Eric W. Davis was the only one that, through Eric Weinstein's eyes, was able to talk the same language. So if it is a UFO, if the whole UFO situation is a fake, then potentially this is one of the things Eric was saying, was that, well, maybe they don't have more physicists looking at this issue because they would be able to rip it apart straight away and identify if it is fact or fraud, or maybe the fact that there is some secret dark Manhattan project that's happening behind the scenes, one of these waived, unacknowledged special access programs that's so compartmentalized that Eric Weinstein would never know if there are physicists potentially involved in that project. But he put the argument forward that everyone that gets a PhD is listed, so you would kind of follow the folks with the PhD and see where they go, and see where what their career path looks like. Do they get sucked into do they get eaten up into some WooSap or some SAP project? If so, that might be an argument for there being some kind of dark project going on, a Manhattan project on this topic. But it's certainly, I mean, there are a lot of things that Eric Weinstein said in his interview with Rogan that were very interesting. And when I was listening to it, I was actually thinking of you, Brad. I was thinking you must have been having so many sonic gravity gasms, because a lot of the stuff that you've talked about, like when we talked about it last year, and just what you've been talking about for ages. I mean, Higgs field, spontaneous symmetry break, Casimir effect, prime directive, all these things that Eric was talking about, you have talked about time and time again. So
going back 2 years.
Yeah.
Did you catch that part when he said on the y-axis?
Decision trees. Like, I wish I could say, yeah, that's what I think it is.
But it might not be.
So one possibility is, let's be honest, if you are faking UFOs, the last people you want are the world's most brilliant physicists. You give them the data, they're going to say, oh, look, I see what you did. You put a couple of flashlights with lasers into the sky, and you can move them really quickly by the angle, and that creates the illusion that something is zipping through the world. Right? If you are faking UFOs, if you're faking a UFO-gasm, the last thing you want is theoretical physicists on the case. So that would be one reason to clear them out. Another reason would be bureaucracy. You've got these rival groups. They're all starved for money. Nobody wants to invite somebody smarter than they are. So the problem with a B-level and C-level players is that they're looking for D and F players so that they're not threatened. That's another possibility. A different possibility is that we do have a Manhattan Project, and we don't know about it. So, for example, we have a Manhattan Project for decoding cryptographic messages, and it's called the National Security Agency, NSA. And it used to be called No Such Agency because we wanted to deny its existence. But now we know it's got a giant building. How do you know that it exists if nobody told you? Well, you'd look at the number of number theory PhDs and people who specialize in things like elliptic curves, and you would notice that a giant number of them after their PhDs disappear. And you track to see, well, where do those people live? Where do those names live? Oh, they live in Virginia. Okay. So you'd start to get an idea. Now, in the case of UFOs, if there was an anti-gravity project, which is, it's painful for me to even say these words. Really what it would be is a post-Einsteinian physics project. If you had a post-Einsteinian physics project, you would want 3 subspecialties for sure. That would be differential geometry, which is the basis for originally general relativity. In 1976, 75, 2 guys named C.N. Yang and Jim Simons, who Jim Simons becomes the world's greatest hedge fund manager, figure out that quantum field theory is also based on geometry, but it's a different version of differential geometry. So that's one specialty that you would want. Second specialty that you would want would be particle theory or high energy physics, however you want to say it. The third specialty you'd want is general relativity. So if you wanted to detect whether we had a secret Manhattan Project, but it wasn't identifiable by a building because we didn't announce its existence, you'd say, is there anything that eats those 3 specialties, unless you believe that there's a secret university system? Because we have lists of everybody who gets produced with a PhD in these fields. If that was the case, the 2 places that you would have a secret place would be Austin, which is the successor to the Institute for Field Physics at the University of Texas Austin Gravitational Group, General Relativistic Group, which has had Archibald Wheeler, Stephen Weinberg, Bryce DeWitt. This is a powerhouse of a place that you happen to live in, and you should have these people who are the successors to these people on, because most of these people have died. But the more spectacular place would be Pawtucket, Long Island.
I'm sorry, I can't play a bunch of it at one time, but if you all have a place in the video you want me to jump to, it's pretty long, so I was guessing there. But I was kind of going to this whole idea of, who might be, the main thing there I was trying to play was the fact that he talked about they wouldn't want B-level players involved, right? So you can almost predict what's happening from the people who are missing in the PhD lineup. But I don't know how relevant that is, to what we're talking about. So
I have a different take on, and I've actually this is like a year and a half ago, but I did an episode called Critical Thinking Part 11. It's American Chrononauts or something. And what I did was I was looking at everybody who was on the Manhattan Project, right? Because Manhattan Project goes off in 45, right? And then we have in 47 all those scientists that were sort of on the Manhattan Project, the insider, Oppenheimer and all these other dudes. Then the guys who were on the payroll who would have been in on this at the time of Roswell, they all split off. And they start doing theoretical physics. They start doing particle. One guy starts to build a collider, and they all start doing everything that you'd need to fly a UFO. And one of the guys who was one of the key Oppenheimer guys, I can't remember his name, starts with that guy S, like Sanders or something. Anyway, you know what he does? He starts building anthropomorphic crash test dummies. They didn't have anthropomorphic crash test dummies in 1947. And the crazy thing is this guy who would have been on the payroll in 47 when Roswell happens invents anthropomorphic crash test dummies in 49. And the Air Force report on Roswell in I want to say 94 or something comes back and concludes that what they pulled out of the wreck in Roswell were anthropomorphic crash test dummies. That was in 47, and they weren't invented until 49 by a dude who was working on the Manhattan Project. So some guy went from building bombs to anthropomorphic crash test dummy inventing. And then 20 years later, the Air Force probably, I don't know, just forgot and said, no, we pulled anthropomorphic crash test dummies out of Roswell. But we know from our history that those weren't invented until 49. So how did they get there in 47? And I think one of the things that could be possible is that, like, instead of looking at where the physicists go now, we can look at where they went back then. And they all got involved in particle physics and colliders. And one of them invented crash test dummies 2 years after the Air Force said they landed in Roswell. So that sounds to me like plausible. Like, it's plausible that if we sent a craft in time, it went massless and somehow crashed in 47. It's kind of like from our future. And that's what gave them their ideas to go start doing whatever it is they were doing. Does that make sense? Anyway, possible. Yeah.
Anything's possible. It's all on the table till it's not. But it was that where Project Mogul had the crash test dummies, or was that another? Yeah, Project Mogul.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Now, Mogul was the one that they said, oh no, that was they said no, Roswell was a crash of a balloon from Project Mogul.
Exactly.
That was what the Air Force said. And the thing is that's bullshit, because it has to be bullshit. Sorry. That has to be incorrect, because Project Mogul was run out of, I don't know, Taos or some other place in New Mexico. That's a fact. It was in New Mexico, and they flew the wreckage. They didn't fly it back to, New Mexico where Project Mogul was. They flew it to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base.
Air Force Base, yeah.
Yeah, in Columbus, Ohio, which is right down the street from Battelle. And that's how we know that's where that wreckage went to Battelle. And that's, I mean, because that's what the interview of the dude who loaded the stuff said. And that was coming out of the Air Force report back in, 94?
I forgot what the Roswell of Australia is, Grant. Do y'all have a Roswell?
Well, not in terms of, we do, I guess. I mean, I suppose for Australia it would be the Westall incident in 1966, which happened in Melbourne, where I live, and it's, I guess, comparable to a degree to the Ariel School sighting in Zimbabwe, where you had all the children. So the Westall incident is a really bizarre one, because you have hundreds of children and I think a couple of teachers that witnessed a craft land into a Grange area, and that there were military on site relatively quickly, and it was all hush hush very, very quickly. And the teacher that was one of the primary witnesses was told to shut up about it. And then the Department of Supply, which is now defunct, but apparently the Department of Supply did a very comprehensive report on the Westall incident. And mysteriously, that report has vanished. It can no longer be located through the National Archives. There's nothing through it on Freedom of Information. It's just gone. So to date, there's no satisfactory explanation has ever been offered as to what the Westall incident was, whether it was some secret technology that of a balloon or a craft that was malfunctioned and they wanted to hush it up very quickly, or was it something else that was completely different, perhaps non-human intelligence in nature? So that's continues to be the most intriguing incident, I believe, in Australia, and it's one that is really a cold case and continues to have so many more questions than it does answers.
That you mentioned Zimbabwe, which is the one that has always impressed me, is really my number one case where it seems to be legitimate, right? But then it just occurred to me while you were speaking that if this is our own technology, would would it be advantageous to land a craft near children who couldn't, who they could easily say, "Oh, you just saw," and whatever.
Impressionable young minds. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. That thought just crossed my mind. Sorry about
Maybe
that.
it was all part of this project.
The Gravity Man.
Yep. It's an out of this world experiment. Wait.
There you go.
Yep.
Oh, there we go.
I put that website together over 10 years ago, and I've just been getting the information out there. Because I feel like one of the reasons why we haven't disclosed yet has a lot to do with what kind of like what Corbell was saying about the dangers associated with the technologies. Like if you're not in the proper right set of mind and you go and you start using these advanced technologies, you could cause a lot of harm to other people. That's true. I mean, like right now we got nuclear bombs. We actually used them on another country. I mean, I think that's insane. When you get something more powerful, I don't think we, meaning as a human species, is quite ready to handle that just yet. That's my personal opinion. Yeah.
That we're still children with playing with matchsticks.
Pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
I mean, I think the Russia war, Ukraine, Russia-Ukraine war right now is kind of a good example of that. Like, why are they even fighting? Why not actually talk? Let's solve the differences here. Let's be
egos.
So this is the thing. What hope is there for humanity to ever become and transition to, say, a type 1 civilization? If we've been a warring, the tribalism mentality has stayed with our human species for millennia, and how are we ever going to break away from that warring mentality to live on a sustainable planet and become a type 1 civilization? I don't know how we can. I don't know how we can when we've got, people in positions of power that don't want to relinquish that power, and they've got their finger on the button the whole time. I don't think the adults know how to be adults.
I think if those people had humanity's best interest in mind, it wouldn't be so bad, but they have their own interest in mind, right? So I think that has a lot to do with it. And also the education system, like what we're taught as far as valuing and morals, I think goes a long way too. But there's a lot of families out there, I
think it's going to take a group it's probably going to take like a cult group like Elon's SpaceX to just do it like on the side, right? So some group of our humans say enough is enough. They take off on a starship and we never see them again. And maybe that's our only hope.
Yeah, it creates a breakaway civilization. And so now there's some cultures, some tribes, you could say, or whatever you want to call them, in the Amazon or in the forest, we've refused to contact because we don't want to mess with their development. So
and Eric Weinstein actually adds that as a talking point throughout the interview. Actually, he uses analogy on that, which is a very interesting one.
So I mean, people, imagine there is a group that is advanced enough to where they don't really even rely on money anymore because they've developed a certain set of technologies. Now they have their water, they have their food, they have their air conditioning, and they're good. They don't really need money, and so they take off into space. Would they look back at Earth and say, "Oh man, look at those primitive humans using nuclear weapons to like destroy each other"? So I think there's different levels, and you have your tribe, you have your developing nations, you've got your potentially a breakaway civilization as well.
Well, there's one theory that says that that's already happened, right?
I think they call it a breakaway civilization.
And that some of this technology we're seeing is that coming back or something, monitoring progress.
Do you think we're expecting too much to come out of government in the way of disclosure? I mean, are we more likely to have a paradigm shift with, say, something being discovered through the likes of the Galileo project or something like that? Is that potentially going to lead to a monumental shift of thinking and how we interact? If Avi Loeb and those subject matter experts that he's been able to source are able to come out with something that's definitive, that hey, this is not man-made, this is not atmospheric phenomena, this is not misidentification, there's something to this. Is that enough of a paradigm shift for our species, rather than waiting for something to come out of the government, which I don't think we're ever going to get anything from the government?
No, I think the government's power comes from secrecy. I mean, they can print. Some would say money. Well, they can print money whenever they need it. What it comes from is their not the knowledge that they're hoarding. Right. So I don't think we're ever going to see anything come from government. It'll have to be.
Yeah. And you know, Weinstein talked about the taboo nature of anti-gravity, aliens, all that kind of stuff. And we know from the whole big pharma capture of the FDA and the CDC and all that kind of stuff, and I really think the disclosure has happened because they're trying to distract us from the Veritas reporting that's pretty much talked about how the makers of those vaccines were talking about how they're going to re-engineer and reinfect everybody with a different strain that they could pre-design their vaccines around. Now, people can argue about whether or not that's true or not. I think it's probably true. But I think probably the spectacular sort of media fanfare around UFOs, the instant media fanfare around UFOs is really intended to blunt some of that coverage that they didn't want to have happen. And so, but sort of back to the original point, I think that it's only going to happen if the people who are in power find it advantageous to disclose it. And so that's why I think we got a teeny bit of disclosure recently. Mm-hmm. And so that's why my focus is not kind of, waiting for the breadcrumbs to get released by the government. It's figuring it out on my own, And so when this NASA guy, says, oh, well, you haven't done this and you haven't, this or whatever. I'm like, dude, hey, listen, man, if you don't believe it, it's cool. I'm not here to try to convince you. I want to share it if you want it. You know what I mean? I want to tell you how to do it. But if you say, oh, no, you don't think it's right, it's not going to hurt my feelings, dude. You can just go ahead and, play with whatever your toys you were playing with before we met. You know what I mean? And so I think that figuring it out on our own is the real solution. And I think we're only going to get away from a society where we're killing people because somebody's killing people because they want their flag to fly over some other piece of ground. The only time that's ever going to stop, really ever going to stop, is when the people who are killing people right now have something better to do, something more advantageous to their lifestyle and prestige and way of life and all that kind of stuff. And I think that the reason that the scientific community hates anti-gravity and poo-poos and looks down on people who think about aliens and that kind of stuff is because the government that doesn't want them focused on it are the ones who are funding them. And so universities, if you want your grants, or all, these academic institutions, the leaders of those academic institutions, if they want government money and they want to be successful, then you need to suppress that stuff. You need to make the culture of science think that those people are crackpots or you're not getting any money. And I think that's where that whole cultural dogma, because it really is sort of a religious dogma of science, that this is for crackpots, that real scientists don't do that. And they think it's all, they tell themselves that they're disposition against anti-gravity, and when it's just a subject, if it's wrong, then debunk it. You know what I mean? But it's not science to just say, oh, it's quackery. That is not science at all. And so it's kind of funny that the scientific community has kneecapped itself and sort of talked itself out of, and I think the government and the funding has manipulated the scientific community into this kind of self-fulfilling prophecy that this is quackery and scientists don't do this. And it's really kind of the whole thing going back to, Roswell and 47, and how the government's trying to suppress the advancement of this technology because they know it's so simple and they can't figure it out. That's what I think the kind of origin of that stuff is. Possibly, maybe, I'm pretty sure.
And that's facts.
Exactly. So there's just as much stigma in the scientific and academic community as there is in the military, as well as there is in the media. They don't want to touch the subject because their fear of ridicule and stigma, and that they're going to lose their reputation and funding, and they're not going to be able to have the successful career that they want. So, or
their security clearance, yeah,
right.
It's a real deal.
I mean,
it's a thing.
This is the thing, I guess current events, if the US government can't even be transparent about what these still 3 remaining unidentified aerial objects are. I mean, we've just seen the Dragon Lady photo, the selfie taken from the U-2 spy plane of the Chinese balloon, but we still don't know anything about the other 3 objects. And, why hasn't the US government yet released photographic imagery of those other 3 unidentified aerial objects? I mean, I've got a couple of thoughts as to why, but I'll be keen to get, your guys' thoughts on why there is this lack of transparency on some, and again, it could be misdirection because, look here, we don't want you to look over here. Nord Stream pipeline, Veritas, all this other stuff.
Well, didn't also the train derail that same time?
Ohio,
yeah.
Huge. Yep. And then don't forget, that was only a week or 2 after the Biden administration, essentially the rail unions were all going to strike and walk, which was going to drive up prices and inflation.
Yep.
And they're saying, hey, we want sick leave because guess what? You get fired if you work on the rail and you're sick and you don't show up to work. You get fired. You don't have sick leave. That's one of the things they were asking for was sick leave. And they essentially forced them to go to work.
Even if they have COVID? I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
That was a bad joke.
Well, I mean, you don't. I mean, you could get fired. If your boss is a douchebag, I mean, you'd have to be sorry, YouTube, but like if your boss was, which I don't understand, man. Like, I don't want a sick guy working the trains. Like, I don't want to get sick, man. But whatever. But then they crash a train.
That's right. They're not going to be able to do their job to the best of their ability, and you've got, putting lives at risk and breach of duty of care.
And now, I mean, I think they were going to send some scientists. First, I guess the EPA or somebody was like, hey, it's all great. Come on back. You can drink the water and everything. It's great. And then they were going to send a bunch of scientists to go really check it out because everybody's like, oh, no, dude, that's a lie. And the plane of scientists that were going to really do the check that crashed and they all died in Arkansas.
I don't know. That's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not trying to suggest that, they were murdered or anything, but anyway, bottom line is like, it's gnarly. Like they may have rendered that place uninhabitable for a while.
When are we going to have train robots to operate trains?
I know. Tesla, where were you?
We need Boston Dynamics on the scene, getting some Atlas robots running those trains.
Well, what's happening with the Boring Company, that Elon's running as well? Like you've got these underground systems that are going to get you from A to B in, lightning speed time. So, is that going to disrupt the rail industry in the decades to come? Probably.
I think this is just total speculation, but I think Elon's vision is a colony on Mars. And I think when the Boring Company, like right now, they're to be viable, they got to dig something, right? But I think his intent for that is to develop technology that will create caves in Mars. It's total speculation, but that's my sense.
Well, no, that's his goal, right? That's the whole point of the Starship is to get people on Mars, right?
Well, you got to have a working prototype, so it makes sense that why wouldn't you do it on Earth first?
But the thing is that's really interesting is Oumuamua, right, was a giant rock of frozen hydrogen or frozen nitrogen, right? A giant rock of frozen nitrogen. Like if you could get Mars to spin, like say you hit it with a giant asteroid and got it to spin so that its magnetic field, because I think, they said there used to be water on Mars. They said that there's erosion on Mars that shows it was sort of Earth-like at one time. So, and then Olympus Mons is this giant, essentially mountain that looks like it got a hole punched in it in Mars.
Yeah.
And if that happened and slowed Mars' rotation, so Mars lost its magnetic field, and that's what caused it to lose its atmosphere and its water and all that stuff. Because if you don't have that magnetic field blocking the solar wind, you lose all your water and air and stuff. And there's no erosion on Olympus Mons. There's like chunks of Olympus Mons that broke up, so it hasn't been eroded. So it suggests to me that it got hit by an asteroid, slowed its rotation, lost its magnetic field, then all its water. And so if you could hit Mars with something to start it rotating, and then you hit it with like a meteor because 80% of our air is nitrogen, right? If you could get Mars to spin somehow, like hit it with another meteor or something, and then you put like hit with an asteroid of frozen nitrogen, and that nitrogen evaporated, it would become an atmosphere. Like you could terraform.
That would take 100,000 years, though, right?
I don't know how big your. I don't know how big
if you hit a planet with an asteroid, it's going to turn into molten lava for a while, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think definitely that's going to be it wouldn't be habitable for like a while, but I don't know how long does it take a volcano to cool. Like, I don't know. I mean, I don't know.
Move more close to Mars and then blow it up above Mars, above the atmosphere. So then it sprinkles down in very fine particles.
Yeah, man. Who knows? Who knows? I mean, you're talking to a guy though. I still think that the Ice Age was created by aliens that just moved a billboard between the Earth and the sun and put it in a shadow for 30 days. Because I found out that's what it would take to cause an Ice Age, is 30 days of night. So, I mean, it's just, you never know, man. You never know. I don't know. What do you think, Grant?
No, I've been following the stuff that you've been putting on Twitter, and I've really delved into, the potential for Atlantis being discovered with the Reichert structure, that in itself. I mean, the work that I can't remember the guy's name, who's doing a lot of research
Insight
on
6. Jimmy?
Yeah. I mean, man, if you start, if you fall down that rabbit hole and you start to read about what, Plato actually said historically and the surrounding geography and terrain, it's completely plausible that location perhaps was once what we know as Atlantis. And that there was maybe an advanced civilization that was here millennia ago that got struck down with an ice age, or there was one of the cataclysmic events that planet Earth endured, millennia ago. What's to say that there hasn't been advanced human civilization here before, and it just keeps rebooting, just keeps getting recycled with every major cataclysm.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about like an ice age, right? Like if the ice age was artificial, right? Like, kind of created in 30 days by, putting the planet in a shadow for a month, and that creates an ice age. Well, then when you take the shadow away, it's going to start melting, right? I mean, it's the planet is going to go back to, what it wasn't. So you could have like oceans worth of melt, like sitting on top of those glaciers, and all of a sudden one cracks, right? And then an ocean's worth of melt blasts across the surface of Africa and wipes out Atlantis. I'm saying it's plausible. I mean, and the more things I see, like if you look at the scientific explanation for why an ice age happens, it's silly. It's like ocean currents. Like, no, I don't think, what I mean? They don't have a reason. They don't have a good reason for why the ice age happened. And if you just kind of look and see, hey, what is the most plausible way that makes sense? And then you start looking at things like, oh, there's only 2 species of mammals with Rh positive and Rh negative blood. It's us and a monkey. That's it. There's only us and a monkey, and there's no evolutionary bridge of mammals with Rh plus and minus blood in between us and that monkey. We start looking like maybe we didn't evolve here. Maybe like, and you start thinking about Noah's Ark, like maybe that legend isn't all that legendary. You know what I mean? Like maybe we were put here, I mean, you start looking at the fossil record and you see all these like, oh, there's 10-foot skeletons found of humans found in this one place. And then there's one little spot where there was other, 300,000-year-old human skeletons discovered. To me, that just sounds like failed colonies that got ate by the megafauna or giant bears or something like that. And it's like, oh, we need an ice age so we can really have this, exoplanet colony of interstellar humans want to put us here. So what do they do? Yeah. Sorry, man. I'm totally hijacking this.
No, it's okay. I was just going to say, I'm commenting on what you're saying is that ice ages come right. It's like a bell curve. I mean, we have warm periods on the Earth. We have cold periods on the Earth. We have warm, right? So you'll have ice ages spread out, 50, 60,000 years apart or something. The last one was what? Aren't we technically still in the tail end of the last ice age?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so.
I think so.
I mean,
So it's lasted what 25,000 years or whatever, and you go back even 100,000. There was other ice ages, so it's cyclical. I guess the way I look at it, but
yeah, could be. I don't know about any. I mean, I have heard what you're saying. I think that, and it sounds pretty reasonable, but to me, like it just seems like it just, if you had to have a story, right, that kind of tied everything together, maybe it's a convenient story, but I don't know, man. Like when you look at the fossil record and stuff,
well, if you look at what we're attempting to do as a species, if Elon's mission is realized, the goal is to colonize Mars, right? So what's not to say that we as a species are able to master technology to leave our planet and colonize another one? What's to say that another advanced intelligence hasn't already done that? Could that be an explanation for why we exist on planet Earth? It's all a plausible possibility that I think needs to be given some consideration as well.
Yeah, and there's something called the stationary action principle in physics, and it's the same reason. It's the reason that water always flows downhill. What goes up must come down. Essentially, when you throw a rock, it will always follow the path of a parabola, right? It's because the stationary action principle, energy essentially kind of minimizes. The action is minimized. But what that means, and I don't know why mainstream science hasn't picked up on this, but that means in an environment like Earth, in an Earth-like exoplanet, human evolution, life, isn't an accident. It is water going downhill. It is the path of least resistance, because it can't happen by accident. It has to follow physics. And if the path of least resistance, essentially the stationary action principle, like your matter, you have DNA, but your matter is actually energy. And energy follows the stationary action principle. And so that means we are inevitable, I think. I don't understand why people think we're special. Like, I think in any Earth-like exoplanet, human-like development must happen. And so in a 14 billion year old universe, right, where we got a reset 65 million years ago by a meteor, right? You have planets with like Earth that have 14 billion years. And if we're not some kind of accident, which we can't be, because the stationary action principle tells us that we're inevitable in an Earth-like environment, then there are Earth-like planets who had humans that have billions of years of evolution more than we do. And that means that we are the colony. That means, because we just got a reset 65 million years ago, we're the youngest baby planet Earth in the universe, so to speak, which means we must be the colony. And when you look at the fossil record and all that kind of stuff, then it starts looking like, yeah, guess what? We're a colony. And by the way, now there's UFOs zipping around that we know pretty much nobody can build here. So what's that tell you? You know what I mean? And, then you start looking, you crack open the, electron microscope, you look at the pyramids, and guess what? It's concrete. It's not quarried stone like the Egyptologists have been saying for 100 years. It's like, and then if you take 8 billion people, assume like a 0.1% growth rate, right? A really super small growth rate. And then you wind that back. We only go 450 generations back, which is about the time of Atlantis. That's the first, that's if human population grew to 8.5 billion years, if you rewind that at a 0.1% per year growth rate, we only go back about 450 generations. So I don't know, man.
And the thing about exoplanets too is that it doesn't mean the life formed exactly the way, like, to look like us, right?
Right. An exact planet like us.
There. Yeah.
Yeah. So an exact planet like us would look exactly like us, right? Because it follows the stationary action principle. A little bit different might make us a little bit different. But I think that's an issue of degree, which could be the difference between grays and all that. But then in a planet that doesn't get a reset 65 million years ago, right? Guess what? Dinosaurs probably stay on top. And guess what the smartest dinosaur was? It was a Druidon. Troodon had an opposable thumb. It was a smart velociraptor. And birds are genetically sort of evolved from lizards. And so when I start hearing things about aliens and avians and aliens and lizard people, like I understand that it sounds nutty and crackpotty, you know, but dude, like in a Earth-like exoplanet where the meteor, which I think is interstellar human terraforming, by the way, which is why we were conceived in original sin, because they had to clear out the dinosaurs or we'd be food, right? And so, but I do think though that the idea that lizards or avians, if you just look at objectively, if monkeys can essentially become interstellar, then there's no reason that lizards can't or dinosaurs can't or whatever either. You know what I mean?
Fish.
I don't think we're special.
I tend to think that life could have evolved like the dinosaurs. That's what I imagine on other exoplanets, right? Or some form of life. But I do think humans might be a little bit special.
Yeah.
Because of our rate of expansion, our rate of technology, you know, there's no other species of animal on Earth that has obviously been able to evolve the way we have. But it could be other planets have less intelligent life forms on them.
Well, if you think about the fossil record and you think about just times when things have been found, and like I'm sure there's gaps in the fossil record that exist, and I'm sure those gaps can be over 200 years. I'm making very general statements, and imagine a gap that's 400 years or 500 years. Our entire industrial revolution and all the ages of everything we've been creating have happened in the last 200 or 300 years.
Yeah.
So now go 65 million years in the future, put a 300-year gap of technological advancements. You've missed the entire blossoming from, you could say, riding horseback to rocket ships that go to the moon. So like maybe what you're saying is very possible, that there was an advanced dinosaur species. We don't have 400 years of fossil evidence. They went off to the moon or something. You know, like I'm not saying it's not it's very plausible.
Yeah. I mean,
I wanted to correct Jimmy here. Okay. So they do, Alexei and Brad were recognized on TOE for their theories of everything. So
thanks, man.
Yep.
And it's not just a bit part either. They're whole little programs. Maybe you need to go back and watch all that whole series of what that Kurt did. It's quite involved, but it's good to follow that kind of stuff.
I think it was called the Face Challenge or Theories of Everything Challenge. I forgot.
Yeah, I think it was a Physics and Consciousness Explication Challenge. Yeah. And I think that's the first iteration. It sounds like he's going to be doing a couple of those periodically. But so how did that work when you guys got noticed that you were an honorable mention? Do you get feedback from Kurt and anyone that judged the contest on your submission, or is it something that you'll have a chance to discuss with Kurt on TOE at some point in time? Do you kind of know if there's any feedback provided on your submission?
I didn't really get direct feedback. I got basically they watched my video, and then after they watched my video, they said, "This is actually pretty intense. Can you please send us all your books?" So then I sent all my books, and they were like, "Okay, you know, we're gonna need to consider this." And I think when it comes to Kurt's process, he likes to be really aware and familiar with the people's work, and so he'll study someone for like 6 months to a year before inviting them on.
Yeah.
At the same time, though, it was peer reviewed by his team. You know, and they found it to be valuable, and you know, we're in email communication right now, but there's no set date as far as interview or anything like that. Yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah. I don't know if Brad, if you have a different experience with that or not, but
I don't know. I mean, I don't think anybody emailed me. I just he invited us to show up on that 8-hour TOE stream.
Yeah.
Which I thought was really, really generous. And he just put out another video that just was really, you know, very lover-like, you know, affirmation and, you know, just like super cool, really respectful, and just cast, I think, all of our, you know, our sort of theories of everything and that kind of stuff in just a really generous light. And so, no like real personal feedback, at least to me, no emails or invitations or anything, but certainly I feel like he was so respectful and so like, you know, I mean, he's just really good dude. And if anybody is thinking about, you know, on the next go around, sending something in, man, do it because, you know, I mean, it's really a great experience. It really, really is. He's a good guy. I mean, I just think that's so cool that he would do that.
Yeah, he's pretty awesome. I remember when he agreed to be on PiFi, he said that he asked me to send a list of questions, and he's very structured like that, right? Nobody else has asked me to send questions in advance, right? Like that. It's kind of
yeah, but that's really cool, you know, because then
yeah.
he can, when you
Yeah.
ask him that question, he can really give you just like, he can just really give you a great answer that, you know, that your audience would like, and you know what I mean, that would be interesting. Like that's cool. That's really cool.
No, I was just going to the point that you guys made about him being sort of thorough and wanting to study people, and it's quite interesting when you do get a response, right? So you know the response is genuine when you get one. It's not just like, oh, I drew names out of a hat, here we go, kind of thing.
Well, he did a unique behind the scenes video on his channel, which was really interesting because it kind of shows you a day in the life of Kurt Jaimungal preparing for an upcoming podcast, or his process that he goes through to prepare for his episodes. So it was for anyone that follows Toe that's interested to learn, you know, how he comes up with his content and his process. I thought it was a really insightful look into a day in his life. So yeah, it was pretty cool.
Yeah, I think he's going places. I think his channel is really, I mean, it's really good. You know what I mean? It's just,
I mean, look at the caliber of the guests that he gets. You know, he gets
yeah, totally.
I mean, how many SMEs has he had on his show? I mean, he gets the cream of the crop. You know.
Well, and it's like the way he helps other people. You know, he's helped me. I was really interested in Bernardo Castro, and I just say, hey, Kurt, can you put me in touch? And he was like, oh, sure. And I've had other people that I've called when I was trying to get in touch with Louis Elizondo. Everybody was protecting him, that source. No, I asked 5 or 6 people, and they wouldn't give me his information. And I have finally, you know, had to go through. Luis Jimenez finally gave it to me. But it's funny in this sort of YouTube spectrum, you know, of interviewing people or having shows like this. It's kind of it's kind of hard to break into, to be honest with you, unless you know people. But anyway, he was good. We're gonna have Bernardo on, I think, in a week or so.
Wow, so, man, that's awesome.
Yeah, that's gonna be awesome. And,
I'm so like when I saw him respond to Avi Loeb, you know.
Oh,
yeah.
Did you see what he did for me?
No, I didn't see it.
I had drawn a graph that was, at that time we were talking about artificial intelligence, and I had drawn a graph.
Oh, I saw that. Remember that? Yeah.
And it basically showed the as
one went down like this, the
abilities of humans go down. And what freaked me out was I wasn't ready. Was, you know, when you hold up a piece of paper, things are backwards when you, like, I think you know what I mean?
Yeah,
so I was kind of freaking myself out. Plus I was nervous because here I am, a contractor on with a bunch of physicists and mathematicians. and
I was the same way.
And
I had Dr. Keating. I was like,
and Bernardo just said, "Oh, I know what Tony's talking about. I don't think we're giving that enough attention." And I was like, "This guy's pretty cool." You know what I mean?
Yeah, dude, he totally backed you up.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty awesome. So,
hey, what are your thoughts? I'm keen to know your thoughts. So, Rogan obviously is pro Bob Lazar and is very keen to have Eric Weinstein and Bob Lazar sit down together to talk it out. Because if anyone can read through the bullshit, Joe is of the mind that Eric Weinstein would be able to it'd be a quick study of Bob Lazar. But I mean, that's an interview I would love to see. It'd be an interesting one. But what do you think that would happen? What are your thoughts on that potential duo interview?
I think Bob, I actually like Bob. I have for a long time. I mean, since the 90s when he first did his original interview with George. Mm-hmm. I honestly don't understand where people are coming from with the hate. I mean, to me, he's literally has a company called United
United Nuclear, yeah.
United
Nuclear.
Nuclear. I literally talked to him on the phone. I didn't think I was going to get him. I was trying to get an interview with him, and so I called. He's like, and so I said, I asked him about his. He kind of gave me a short one over the phone, right? He's basically got a lab. He's working in the lab. He's creating chemicals. He's a scientist. I guess I don't get the hate because I don't see how he's any less legitimate than anybody else in this genre, actually, right? So that I think he would do fine. I think he's very knowledgeable, just as knowledgeable as anyone else in this area. I don't know. What do you think? What do you guys think? He signed that post. See that the backdrop is his sport model thing that he signed for me. So maybe I have a little fanboy in me for Bob Lazar. I don't know, but I don't understand the hate, and I don't understand the basis.
I think the hate is an attempt to discredit in an attempt to keep things hidden. I think that Bob is a very genuine person.
Yeah.
Those are my 2 cents on it. Yeah.
And my intuition's pretty good. I mean, I'm pretty good about reading people, and I don't see any lies. I mean, tell me who else is not lying? I mean, or the people that hate Bob Lazar, tell me who you trust. That's what I want to know.
Well, from what I've seen too, he's not holding anything back. He's basically told everything that he knows, right? And seen. Where you have other people like maybe people that we talked about earlier today that are holding back information. So if anything, I like Bob more because of that. Like he's actually he actually put his foot down and said, "Okay, let's get this information out."
One of the things I always found interesting about Bob Lazar, and I'm kind of still sitting on the fence. I kind of follow. I could lean either way, but the thing that I found interesting is that his story really hasn't changed significantly since 1989 when he first came out. And if you were given an opportunity to come clean and admit you are lying, well, you think it would be in front of a judge when you're being pulled up for prostitution, or not prostitution, but it was I don't know what charge he was being put forward for, but he was in front of a judge and he didn't change his story. He stayed true to what he said from day one. So I think if someone is lying and they go before a judge with the potential of doing some pretty significant time, you think that would be a chance for them to come clean and admit it was all a ruse or a hoax. But he never did, and that's something that I've always kind of kept in the back of my mind. Well, again, he still hasn't changed his story, even when he was given an opportunity to do so in front of a judge. So,
what do we have Jeremy Corbell saying right now? We have a craft. We have, you know what I mean? They're basically the current people that some people trust, who are saying is their guy, right? Is saying exactly, pretty much the same thing that Bob said 30 years ago, right? Wasn't it in the early 90s, right? When he first when he first came out with the first interview with George.
And the thing is that I think they've attacked his degrees, his academic education and stuff like that. But here's the thing. Like, the government hired him, right? They said, show us your transcript. You know what I mean? Like, oh, you got degrees in this now. He had to produce transcripts. Like, that's a fact. Like, you're not going to get hired as a scientist or whatever, and you say, oh, I have a degree, unless you can offer some proof that you actually went to school there. And so for him to be on the job, right, and then all of a sudden, oh no, he doesn't have any of those degrees, to me that just doesn't pass the smell test. Either the government doesn't check the credentials, the academic credentials of the people that are working on top secret projects and spaceships and stuff, or he did, and the captured academic institutions that want those grants and want those contracts and things like that, the government said, hey, he can't have graduated there. You need to get rid of it. And then, so when the institution says we don't have any record of his attendance here, you know what I mean? If they got rid of the records, then that's not completely untruthful. And so all I'm saying is that a guy who discloses stuff that the government wants a lid on would be subject to that kind of sort of abuse and and discrediting and things like that. The government does that. And it sucks, but I mean, and two, you're talking about you're talking about a different time too. You know what I mean? And so, yeah, I think there's I'm gonna believe the guy, because when it comes to somebody who's trying to do the right thing and takes on the establishment, right, and doesn't have anything to gain, right? Like, what's he have to gain? Nothing.
He hasn't asked for anything.
I mean, it's just like, dude, like, I don't know. If I had to pick, if nobody's making me pick, but if I had to, I'd probably throw down with the little guy until I find different.
The thing is that the level of intelligence required, I hate to say this, is, I mean, I grew up with people who were savant level, right? And they could read a book and they could read, Einstein's theories, and they would just absorb it, right? There are people like that that don't have those degrees, who are knowledgeable in subjects, right?
Like Einstein.
Yeah.
He wasn't a physicist. He was like a patent clerk.
Yeah.
That was like a gimme from somebody he knew.
I don't think the college degree actually proves anything. I mean, even if he wasn't a degree professional and he showed that he had this ability to do these things, I mean, what is the government going to do? They need somebody like that, right, to do the work. They're gonna turn him down because he doesn't have a PhD. I don't know.
See that, and that's why I think it would be such a fascinating conversation for Eric Weinstein and Bob Lazar to sit down. Because if Bob is who he says he is, man, what a fascinating conversation that would be between those two guys, talking the same language. It would just go off into so many different areas and rabbit holes. I think that would just be a really interesting. I mean, the law, the UFO mythology and folklore that lives with Bob Lazar, but putting him with someone like Eric Weinstein, that is a legit guy. I mean, he says he's not a physicist, but he knows a hell of a lot about that language. I think that would just be a really fascinating conversation for those two guys to sit down.
Alexei, are you good on time?
I gotta go. I've been waiting for the perfect time to.
I wanted to be polite to you because I knew you said you needed to go at a certain time, so I didn't want you to not have that window of opportunity.
I do. So, I need to take off.
Well, I appreciate you coming. I mean, you always add something to the conversation, and that's why I like you coming to visit. And I don't know, Alexei and I pretty much become friends through this, but he's still that guy, when I need someone to challenge someone like you two, he's always there. I appreciate it, Alexei.
No worries. Thank you for having me. I don't know if you guys are going to keep going, but I'm going to go ahead and excuse myself from the conversation. I don't know.
It's great seeing you again, man.
Yep.
It's great to chat with you. Yeah.
Yes, sir, Grant. I've seen you for a long time. It's great to finally actually communicate a little bit. So that's cool.
Likewise, man. Yeah, indeed.
Yeah. Artisan, thank you for having me. And
thank you, Alexei. We'll hopefully see you with Bernardo.
What was that, Wednesday, or what day is that?
I need to get that. I need to look. I was just looking, and I kind of freaked out a little bit because I need to look at his last email. We had to move it to a week, so I think it's exactly Wednesday.
Sounds good.
At the same time. So, yeah.
I'll see.
Get Bob to come on, man. That would be cool too.
Yeah.
I've actually tried. He doesn't like doing interviews with just anybody. He's not luckily Elizondo. He won't do an interview with just anybody. But
oh man,
I've tried. Trust me, you got to be a Joe Rogan level podcaster. I still like the guy though. Well, thank you, Alexei.
Have a good night, guys. I'll see you later.
See you, man. God bless you.
Thank you.
Hey, I was going to ask Brad, what were your thoughts? I don't know if you saw one of the latest episodes that Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp did on the new Weaponized podcast. They had Colm Kelleher come on, who was the project lead for ORSAP, and he was talking about cattle mutilations. And he was saying there was this real clandestine government operation to kind of spoof the phenomena of cattle mutilation to better understand this potential spread of mad cow disease. It was some government operation going on these ranchers' farms, hoaxing these cattle mutilations to try and better understand potential spread of mad cow disease through the food chain and the food supply. I'd never really heard much about that, and I think Colm actually goes into it in great detail, and he's authored a book. I think it was called Brain Trust or something like that. But if you haven't seen the interview, check it out because it's a very interesting one based on I know you did Cattle Mutilations 101 on Sonic Gravity podcast, but interesting stuff.
Yeah, it was really and your boy Ross Coulthard, he had a lot to say about cattle mutilation because in Australia there were, I guess, and I lifted this audio from his interview that was on Toe with Kurt Jaimungal, and I guess when he started asking around, he was getting calls from ranchers all over Australia wanting to talk about cattle mutilation, and he was saying that they were getting completely exsanguinated, bloodless animals, things like that. And at one time he talked about a veterinarian that was like, Ross, man, I couldn't believe it, man. He's missing the third stomach. He got to there's like 3 stomachs, and he had to lift like 2 stomachs and get one out. And so I was like, well, so we started in the podcast, we started talking about like what's happening in the physics, and that we think that when the quantum echo goes back in time, it's wrapped in gravity. And so when a cow gets too close to it, and the pressure and all that probably puts it around 600 or 700 degrees Celsius, that gravity field, it would suck a cow in and would like flash boil all its blood. So that's how it could be getting exsanguinated. And I think there was another thing. Who's the other guy? Who's the other guy on Weaponized? George Knapp.
George Knapp.
Yeah.
George Knapp. Well, he was saying that like the most of those cattle mutilations that they see, or that he's in his experience as a journalist, have arisen like that. They have like half their face ripped off, tongues pulled out, eyes sucked out. Exactly what would happen sort of if you got sucked into a gravity field and flash boiled and then chucked out. You know what I mean? Like totally wiped out, eviscerate all the meat, on that little calf or whatever it was. And, if you could squeeze squeeze the cow really tough, you could squirt its third stomach out of its anus, so to speak, perhaps, and so that's a way that, the pressure could explain what Ross was seeing and what George Knapp was seeing and everything. And so when Colm Kelleher started talking about there were like scalpels found and all that kind of stuff, to me, that didn't make any sense. And to me, like my instinct on that whole bit is the government knows what's happening and is trying to make it look like it's human doing. And I sort of felt like maybe Colm fell for it. Like that was what he keyed onto. But it seemed like George Knapp, and it seemed like Linda Moulton Ho, and it seemed like Ross Coulthard weren't really that taken with those few instances where they had like, somebody come in and butcher a cow or something.
Yeah.
So it seemed like sort of like a misinformation, like a kind of a, kind of like a red herring or something. I don't know.
I need some help with the whole cattle mutilation thing. I'm on the fence about it, and it's almost like I need to see one for myself, because I don't know. I'm just trying to figure out why aliens need to abduct cows and mutilate them. I don't think I agree with you. I don't think that's what it is. I think what happens when you fire up a massless craft is that the mass, because you see them take off like a shot, like instant velocity, right? So the only way you could do that is if your craft was massless, right? And that's what the whole anti-gravity thing was all about. Well, if you spin up that field and the left-handed electron works like I suggest it might, and then you reduce the Higgs to the ground state, your mass has to go somewhere, right? Conservation mass energy, you can't destroy the mass. Well, there's nothing that says the mass can't go back in time. So it's not in our time. So, and that's the kind of thing that satisfies Einstein's wormhole solution. And so the idea is that the mass would go back in time. It's wrapped in negative energy density. So the positive energy of the mass is canceled by the gravity in whatever time it lands in. And I talk about the physics, I've done it ad nauseum, so I don't need to do it now. But then what you have is in time, back in the past,
you have the mass of that ship wrapped in gravity to balance it. And so all of that gravity will be like sucking in air and creating lots of pressure and friction. And so even though you're flying around in 2023, if the quantum echo of your mass is back in 1956, you know what I mean? And you've got your craft and you're flying sort of in this, you know, if you're flying in this, you know, area, but it turns out that in the past it was a pasture, right? And a cow walks up to it and gets like, you know, mutilated, right? You might not even know it, right? Because you're not in your mass is back in time, wrapped in gravity. But if you look at that stuff, if you ever go look in sort of the research, you'll find, or at least I found, that the pictures will show scorched earth. Like you'll see like a swath of like torn up ground, a huge swath, which would be what you would get if there was a big gravity field that was super hot that was sitting on that. All the vegetation will be like flattened or gone. It'll be singed. The animals will be completely emasculated. They'll be totally eviscerated, bloodless, liquidless animals. Like all of the moisture in their body was flash boiled. The skin will be ripped off their face, you know, wherever it came in contact with, you know, the craft or whatever. And so all of the, at least in, you know, after, because I didn't know about cattle mutilation. I didn't even start caring about UFOs till 2 years ago. But then when I'm looking, I'm like, okay, well, if this is happening and if that's true, then this would explain it. And that's what cattle mutilation 101 is all about. Is just about, well, here's what the sonic gravity quantum echo theory predicts about what would happen. And if that was there, then these are the things that we would expect if, you know, a cow walked up and, you know, walked into this quantum echo that's wrapped in, you know, all these gigajoules of negative energy density. And then it turns out that that's what happens. That their liquid is flash boiled and that their stomach gets squeezed out of its butt, you know, and it's, you know, so, but just look and see, like, if you go look at those pictures, man, you're going to see a swath of torn up, scorched ground, right? And you're going to see these emasculated ground beef, so to speak. And yeah, so
I think I'd have to be a rancher who owned, you know, had some cattle, and then I would like hear a noise and go out there and see it. You know what I mean? Because otherwise, I'm going to be like skeptical that someone prepared that cow for me to see. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, you know, Linda Moulton Howe interviewed ranchers.
Yeah,
she did.
Right.
She interviewed him, and she said there were ranchers saying that they saw cows falling from the sky. That she saw cows like falling down through the trees. That's what she said. The rancher said, and that kind of makes sense if it's a gravity field and the cow's walking into it, and then it gets sucked in and swirled around. But then the ship takes off and drops the cow, and the cow falls down. You know what I mean? So, you know, when she was talking, and I didn't just like recount it. I actually lifted the audio, and it's her saying it, that's what she saw, that's what somebody told her.
Oh no, I mean, she's been into cattle mutilation since. I mean, that's kind of what got her started back in the 70s or whatever. She's been
Strange Harvest, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you kind of think it was just wrong place, wrong time for cattle that fall victim to. I mean, it's not just cattle too. If you believe what Colm Kellemer is saying, it's deer, it's elk, it's dog, it's rabbit, it's different. But I wondered why, though, there has never been any reports of any humans that have fallen victim to being wrong place, wrong time. Is there something intelligent enough about the massless craft if future human massless craft in the future, that there's a level of control over the quantum echo that it knows to evade human detection and populated areas?
Well, I mean, I gotta believe that if that's what's going on, right? Like you said, they're gonna know. Like, people are gonna know, hey, this is what happens. And so maybe they're like, hey, let's make sure that where we're flying this thing, we know is like pasture land, or there's not a lot of people. But, you know, funny thing is from the Madman's Curse, right? Remember I lifted that audio of that Aussie Kelly Cahill.
Kelly Cahill, yeah.
And she said,
that's true. Actually,
And
very good
she
point.
said,
Yeah.
now I think though that I think what she saw was a quantum remainder. So because the ship landed on the ground in her time, which means a craft must have opened up a wormhole, and the craft that she experienced must have flown through the wormhole and landed, because what she felt was this sense of awe, like, oh my goodness, you know. And I think those cows, it's possible that's what they feel too, and so they like wander up trying to get friendly with the ship. But then when the thing cut its field, and obviously now the mass of the craft is in that time, right, which it shouldn't be in that time anymore, because its negative energy density is zeroing it out. But that means that when it kills the field, right, in order for that ship to be there and not violate conservation of mass energy, it brings with it that gravity, and the gravity releases, which is negative energy, which counterbalances the mass that it just deposited there. So in some ways it makes sense. And she said she felt that huge like wave pass through her, and it horrified her. Remember, like she said, she was absolutely terrified of this wave that like went through her, this, which I think is a gravity wave, a negative energy. And it makes sense that if all of a sudden, boom, a ship's worth of mass, E equals MC squared, that's a lot of energy. In order for it to show up, it would have to balance itself by releasing that gravity into that time so that it balances, right? Because if the negative energy was released and Cahill felt it go all the way through her, and she said it horrified her. She couldn't explain why, but it totally horrified her. I mean, it ate some of her energy, right? And so, because it had to balance the presence of the craft. And then she said she got hit by a shock wave, which that makes perfect sense, because if you're massless and there's no space there, and then all of a sudden you kill that field, well, now, you know, there's fermions, right? Like electrons and all that kind of stuff. And fermions can't occupy the same space, energy levels, right? They have to. And so what would happen is you would shove essentially all the air, there would be pressure, because you would be pushing out all the air, like an air's worth of, you know, of ship or whatever. And so you'd get hit by a shockwave. It would be like, I mean, it would.
I don't know if you guys have ever seen, you know, I'm into ballistics a little bit, but when a round hits simulated, you'll have a shock wave, but inside that you'll have a little explosion. You'll have a cavity that forms, and then when that starts to go back to what, you'll have a little implosion, and that's where that little fireball comes from. And I don't know if you've ever seen the simulated material that they use for ballistics testing, right? The round goes in, there's a little bit of a bulge, and when that thing starts to implode, there's an explosion because of the collapse of that field in there. And I don't know, I was just thinking about that when you were talking about you know, all that
makes
happening.
Perfect sense. So everything she said, in my opinion, everything she said to me makes perfect sense with you know, what I'm suggesting is going on in the physics with the you know, the essentially breaking the symmetry of the Higgs field, and then your mass has to go into the past, but it has to balance with gravity that comes from tension in the Higgs string. And so, but when something flies through and then all of a sudden, boom, you know, now it's there. If you know, the space, you know, and she said they spoke English, and they're like, somebody do something about her. Like, you know, like the aliens spoke English. So to me, I'm just thinking, and it's called and Tony, if you haven't listened to it, it's called The Madman's Curse. And I lifted these interviews and stuff. And so it's her talking. And then I talk about the reason I think the physics is what it is, and it matches what she's saying she's experiencing. And just so you know, I have been talking about the physics for years. Well, not years, but at least a year before that. So it's not like I heard that and then made up this stuff to match it. But it's like it matched what I was saying before. And so I'm like, you know what? I believe Kelly Cahill. She's Australian. And I mean, I believe it.
What's her background? I haven't heard of her. Who is she?
Do you know Grant?
I don't. I have to go back and have a look, read up on her. Yeah, she's an Australian. From when was her account in the 90s?
Yeah, 93.
93. Yeah. So no, I don't know a lot about her history. It's one that I'm interested to learn a little bit more about. But Yeah.
We have a
Because I
debate
mean, like,
going
I believe
on.
people. I believe my default when it comes to Kelly Cahill, especially with Babazar, man, I'm gonna believe him. I'm gonna believe him.
I have a tendency to give people the benefit of the doubt. For some reason, I'm good at reading people. I don't know what it is about my intuition, but when I meet someone, I can almost tell, whether they're a BS artist or not. It's kind of funny. But we have a debate going on in the chat about Skinwalker Ranch, and I have to admit I've been a little skeptical about Skinwalker Ranch. I've talked to Brandon Fugel a little bit. I'm trying to get him. He's agreed to come on at some point
Great.
when he's
Dude,
not so
that'd be
busy.
cool.
Yeah.
And I guess he
dude.
knows I'm a little skeptical, but I guess because they haven't really produced that much to show. At least they're not showing much. I would like to see more evidence there.
My fear for Skinwalker, the hunt for Skinwalker Ranch, is that it will turn into the Curse of Oak Island, where you'll have 10 or 12 or how many of seasons they've done. They still haven't. I mean, they've found stuff that's compelling and interesting on Oak Island, but
That's basically what Daniel Boone said.
It would be great to have the hunt for the Skinwalker Ranch, or the Secrets of Skinwalker Ranch is definitely. It's produced by, what is it, Prometheus, or what's their goal is to obviously get a return on their investment. So they obviously, there's revenue part of that whole project. It would be great to see a bit more of a serious science, data-driven assessment side of that as well, but maybe a separate project. That's maybe just the hard data and the hard data-driven assessments. I think that the risk that people run with a show like Secrets of Skinwalker Ranch is that it will just keep continuing on and on and on, and you'll never get a resolution because of the entertainment value that it offers. I enjoy it. I find it entertaining, and I would love to see more data come out of it. But I just fear that it's gonna be such a breadwinner for the History Channel that it'll turn into another Curse of Oak Island.
I'll just give you one example. It's frustrating for me, okay? Because they had one episode where they're putting up cameras everywhere, right? We're going to cover every square inch of the ranch. And then they have this, what was the guest animal that they had? And it was in a pen, and it gets attacked, right?
Oh, the alpaca or something?
Yeah, it was an alpaca.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
or it wasn't a llama. It was an alpaca.
I think it was an alpaca, yeah.
Yeah. So, but here's the video. The video's like, so they put the alpaca in a pen, right? But it gets attacked that night or one night. But for some reason, the camera doesn't quite get. There's cameras everywhere, and they know where they're putting the alpaca, but they don't put a camera right on the alpaca. I don't know. It's just that's the frustrating thing for me is that you've got this. You're spending all this money on science, and you're not getting any results, out of the science. But anyway, people don't like it when I talk about it. So,
no, man, I think everybody likes what you have to say. And if you're saying that, I guarantee you you got listeners who are saying the same thing. You know what I mean?
But we got Jimmy here saying that what did he say? I am an insider. The show data interviews of the team have some explanations.
Yeah, that's true. They do have there's a Skinwalker Ranch Insider where you can kind of get exclusive access to their 24-hour webcams and data and everything. So I probably should correct what I said. They probably do share a lot more data, but it is through this insider program and other endeavors. But I find it to be a very entertaining show, but I don't think we're going to get a ton of resolution come out of an entertainment show.
I think there's something there. I really do. Agreed. Carl Vibe.
Mm-hmm.
I met him on the Singularity Lab once, and we talk a bit. We DM sometimes, and what he said recently was that there's kind of two sort of levels of things that are happening there. There's rules about that place, and there's reasons there are rules. And nobody's told me anything like secret or anything like that. But here's what I think, and I think I've already said this on some other venue. But there's definitely something going on there. There's energy that is going through that place. That's a fact. Like, you know, it like disturbs instruments and makes people feel ill and sick and like that. I can, stuff that's like verifiable. There's energy there. There's anomalous energy that's happening there. Yeah. Which is radiation. And so, it's, essentially particles moving at close to the speed of light, like electrons, things like that. And so, and anything that moves close to the speed of light is, it's a ray, it's an X-ray, it's a gamma ray, it's cosmic ray, microwaves or whatever. Well, so what I'm convinced of is that, first of all, there's something in the ground. I don't know if it's there yet or if it's gonna be there in the future. I think it's possible that there's something that's there now that is part of a communication or a transportation system. And the reason I think that is, and I did this episode, I forget what it was called. I think it was called the Real Prime Directive. And the 2022 Nobel Prize was given to a guy for quantum entanglement. And of course, what I think the holographic universe is that there's a hologram and the energy is oscillating through it, and it happens it crosses an oscillation in quantum physics, right? In the wave equation, crosses at 2 points. It's matter here, it's antimatter here, and it's off the hologram. When it's off the hologram, it's dark matter when it's there and there, but it's real when it's in the hologram. And so quantum entanglement happens when you hammer one of those particles, you increase the energy in that hoop, and it actually pushes the other point, the quantumly entangled particle, it pushes it away in space. That's the mechanism I think is happening. That is not consensus. What is consensus is when you grab those quantumly entangled particles and you hammer it with a harmonic laser, you do push that particle out in space. And they were saying that, hey, we're examining this particle and we're knowing what the antiparticle is, the other end, before the speed of light could get there and tell it to be whatever it is. And so they're saying, oh, it's non-local, or the reason I think it is, and this is not consensus, is because this U1 is an oscillation through the hologram, and that particle is the same particle. So when you hit it or you observe it, you automatically know it because you're actually looking at it here, but it's also here. And so but it's not consensus that it's the hologram. But here's the thing. If you hammer this one and it sends this out in space, if you were to catch that antiparticle in some kind of magnetic field, and you held that part and you let go of this one, and then you hammer this with the antiparticle with the same laser, I think you reel in the other particle. Okay. So they were talking about, oh, look, we're talking about the speed of information. I think without really realizing it, they just stepped on Star Trek beaming technology. So if you hammer that particle and you extend it out in space and then you catch it and hammer the other side and you reel that particle back in, you just teleported, right? You just extended a particle out, caught it, and then you reeled the other end of the particle back in. If you could do that, and it's totally feasible that you could do that with one particle. How you do that at scale, how you survive the trip, I don't know. I haven't figured that out yet. But if that's what teleportation is that quantum entanglement where you hammer the particle, it goes out space, you catch it, then you hammer the other one, reel it back in. If that is teleportation, and I told this to Brandon Fugal, or at least he was on a tweet that I tweeted him. I'm like, hey, guess what? I think you have a teleporter pad underneath of Skinwalker Ranch. And I think when that energy comes, that's what you're getting, that burst there. You're getting the reeling the energy back there or sending it out. And so what it could be, and the reason it's plausible, if the pictures of those weird creatures and aliens that are like walking around, those weird mammals, you know what I mean? If those are other interstellar mammals, right? That sounds bananas. That teleported there, and then it could reconcile if those are true exotic weird animals from some other, wherever, then it's plausible that they could get there if the 2022 Nobel Prize is really teleportation, Star Trek beaming technology. Because then you have a scenario where it would be plausible that you could teleport something from somewhere else and land it at Skinwalker Ranch. You could.
But let me talk about the practical side of this, though. Okay, the practical side is that this whole area is in the wash of the nuclear testing of the 50s, right? So
Sure.
you could easily, and they're in a basin. The part of the ranch is in this basin, right, where particles can easily gather and cause disruption to their Geiger counters and all this kind of stuff. So there could be practical. And the other thing is there was this episode where the guy was doing the ground penetrating radar, right? And there was this they see a pocket or a difference in density in the soil about 20 feet down, and they're like, we're gonna have to dig. And then one of the I started to say one of the actors on the show, I'll be nice and say one of the characters, what's his name, the the guy, I don't know what his name is. Anyway, he's like, no, we can't dig. We just
Dragon.
can't.
I'll probably Dragon.
We can't do it. We can't. It's obviously a script, So, and I'm like, you know what? Let me take my track hoe, my excavator. I'll go out there, and in 10 minutes, I can dig a hole that's that big, right? And I will find what is in the ground at 20 feet. I just dug the basement on a house we're building that's deeper than that. Okay, we did it in a day. There's always this level of complexity that's entered into it in order to not accomplish some goal, right? So they went through all the trouble to have the guy come out with the ground penetrating radar, but we can't dig, right? We can't.
I mean, if there's something below, I think that's why I think there's something under the ground there.
I told Brandon on Twitter, I said, dude, I'll come out there, I'll bring my excavator, I'll dig that, and he didn't respond to that one. But
I guarantee you that there's Carl said there's a left hand working out there and there's a right hand working out there. And those two hands don't know anything about, well, I'm sure the one hand knows what the other one's doing, but there's one hand down there that nobody knows and nobody's allowed to know what's going on. And so if I had to speculate, just given that I've seen pictures of like werewolves walking around Skinwalker Ranch, I've seen pictures of that. Now, somebody could fake that, I guess. If that's faked, then it's fake, right? But it didn't look fake. It didn't look like a dude in a costume. It looked like a legit mammal that didn't come from here. That's what it looked like.
You could have birth, you could have animals with birth defects or whatever from the radiation.
Yeah, I mean, you could
that kind of thing.
But I'm just saying, you've got these wacky, asymmetric, periodic, intense bursts of energy. Like that doesn't happen randomly. Like that's not a decaying nuclear event from 70 years ago. That is a major energy release that has to come from somewhere. And I just, if there was a more plausible explanation, I would love to hear it. I want
to challenge you guys though to do this, okay? Because I've done this over the past year. I've been trying to get an interview from Brandon for a year now. And what I've done is I've actually studied his other life outside of Skinwalker Ranch. He's a very successful businessman. Obviously, he's into development and real estate, and he also collects these bizarre things like
movie props and
he may have the original version of the Mormon Bible. I don't know, stuff like that. But the interesting thing to me is, I hope I know he doesn't watch my videos, so I don't have to worry about this. But he doesn't talk about Skinwalker Ranch in his professional life. It's like a separate part of his being, right? It's like, oh, that's the hobby side of me, but I'm not going to let that get into my professional life, right? I don't know if you all have again, I have this intuition, and I've studied him, and I don't. If he was really that spiritually and physically and mentally into this, I think he would be all in. I don't think he's all in. I think he's got this investment that Skinwalker Ranch, that's a reality show, right? I think that's that. And then his professional life and his personal life is separate. from that. That's just my take on it after studying him over a year.
Well, he said, I mean, when Stephen Greenstreet, no matter what you think of Stephen Greenstreet, but he did obviously the Basement Office episode on Skinwalker Ranch, and he profiled Brandon Fugel quite comprehensively, and Brandon actually said, I'm just a 17-year-old trapped in a 40-year-old's body. So he's a big kid at heart, and I think there's just a private life to him that is just, driving around in fast cars, collecting movie props, the science fiction kind of anomaly aspect of Skinwalker Ranch is satisfying his big kid curiosity. But then in his professional life, he's a very successful real estate developer for Colliers in Utah. So,
but can you imagine? Can you imagine though? Take Steve Jobs for example, or Bill Gates. When they wanted to create their computer companies, technology companies, was it a hobby to them that they just did over on the weekend, and they weren't really interested in that? They were just thought they would invest in it. No, they were in. They dove in head first.
Yeah, but they were kids, man.
That was their life, man.
We got kids though. We got kids and jobs, and like people are like, oh, you really think that's anti-gravity? Why aren't you like devoting everything you have to it? Dude, I don't have that bandwidth. You know what I mean? Like
I don't have anything against anti-gravity. I'm talking.
No. Yeah, but like people are like, oh, it's BS. You should be famous. I'm like, dude, no, that's not. No, I'm not famous.
What I'm talking about is when it's just like with me. My entire life has been planned around doing what I'm doing. I planned from. When I put my first Lincoln log together at 5 years old, I said, I'm going to design and build things for the rest of my life. That's all I've ever done. Okay. That's all I want to do. It's my passion. I just don't see his passion being this genre. I think it's an investment for him, which is fine. We need people to invest in things. But to me, that's an indicator. It's a data point. That's all it is.
It could be both. I mean, it's he can. Maybe he doesn't want that passion to be his profession. I think his profession can be a passion, but also this aspect that is Skinwalker Ranch is also a passion, and maybe he wants to leverage his profession to help fuel the ongoing investments and money he's spending on Skinwalker Ranch, because he's piled in a lot of his own money, not so much on the show, but obviously acquiring the ranch and upkeep and all of that sort of stuff. So I don't think it's it doesn't strike me as an alarm bell that he's not his passion for Skinwalker Ranch is not his profession.
Yeah, and I think too, like he's an executive, and when you think about the way executives run stuff, right? They don't do a lot of like rolling up their sleeves and actually physically doing it themselves, right? They find the best people they can find. They pay him to, kind of execute his intent. And so I think with a lot of his stuff, all the things he's into, right? I mean, he has an executive mentality where it's like, okay, so I'm paying these people to do this show. I'm paying these people to do this and that. And I want to be kept informed. But I don't think, when Bill Gates was sorting out Microsoft, man, he was slinging code. I mean, he was actually doing it.
Well, look at Elon Musk. Can you imagine him not going to the shop and doing code work for? He freaking goes to Twitter and does code work, and then he goes and builds rockets and launches them, 2 or 3 a month into space. Can you imagine him not being passionate about what he's doing?
Well, I mean, he tried to back out of Twitter, remember? And then they're like, "Oh, he's not going to get out of it." And so now
that's because of the whole bot thing.
But now he's trying to. Now he's got to make it work. I mean, he's got a lot of money in that. That's $40 billion. He's going to make sure it ain't. Yeah.
I'm just saying, I don't see the same kind of passion for. I see it just kind of as it's just it's an investment. I need to make this reality show. I got to make this work. Here's a script. Dragon, you act indignant whenever they want to dig a hole, that kind of thing. But anyway, I'm not bashing it. I think it's slightly entertaining. I'm just saying I'm not gonna believe in aliens because of Skinwalker Ranch. I believe in I believe in extraterrestrials because I just believe that there's lots of life in the universe.
Yeah.
Not because
stationary action principle.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
And I know people say, "Oh, space is too, the universe is too vast. We'll never see, whatever." But it's okay. I still think they're there.
Yeah, I mean, but I was thinking about the other day too, right? So, a lot of people have said that, well, it takes so long to go so far, right? Like light years, like 20,000 light years would take you in time's relative. If you go at the speed of light, it would take you minutes, right? You would experience minutes, but everybody on Earth would be like 20,000 years older, right? Like you wouldn't even recognize, you couldn't even go back and recognize Earth. But here's the thing: if quantum flight works like I think it works, where it opens a wormhole, right, as far back as the mass that you render massless, then you can say you want to fly 2,000 light years away, and then you got to come 2,000 light years back. You could spin up a wormhole with enough mass to give you, essentially send you back 40,000 years into the past. So then you fly through the wormhole, you're 40,000 years into the past. You go in a blink 20,000 light years away, and then you kind of do whatever you're going to do 20,000 light years away. Then you zip back at the speed of light, and you're home in time for dinner. So
if you can dial it in.
Yeah, well, you dial it in, and that's what I think. Yeah, that's what I think crop circles are. I think crop circles are the
only option, really. Because space. I know you don't like this idea, but
that's okay.
We think space is expanding, right? Right. So at the speed of light, right? So if you're at this planet that's already light years away, and you start traveling at the speed of light, you'll never get here, right? Because you're flying through space that's expanding at the speed of light. So the wormhole is the only option, really.
Yeah.
Right.
And they think universal expansion, I think, is something like 75 meters per second or 175 meters per second per megaparsec or something. There's a certain formula. They know exactly how fast it's going. It's not going exactly the speed of light. It's going like...
Yeah, when I said that, I started Googling because I felt like maybe that was too fast. But
no. Yeah, I mean, so it's like per megaparsec or something. Some kind of.
I think the point is that there's part of the universe that we'll never be able to see because it's too far out and expanding at a rate where the light will never reach us. Basically.
I think that's possible. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, to get to the end of the universe. Yeah, like I don't know how you could never do that. You'd never get back. I mean, because.
Yeah. So you have to figure out a way to fold space-time, the fabric of space.
But I think the reason we don't need to become nomadic, which I don't think anybody's thought of, is if this is what happens when there's a wormhole. If you spin up a wormhole, then you take your massless craft and fly through it. If you can get that wormhole to go twice as far in time backwards that you need to travel, if you can make it go 2,000 years into the past because you need to go 1,000 light years, then you can travel 1,000 light years at the speed of light. It'll take you a couple minutes. Then you get there, do whatever you're going to do. Then you fly 1,000 light years back, and then you're home in time for dinner.
But I don't see it as going back in time, right? Because if we're here now, right, and someone who existed that far away is there now, right, and they're folding space-time, they're folding the fabric of space. They're not really traveling back in time necessarily. I'm with you on the folding of space and the wormholes, but I still don't think that the past exists. I don't get.
But it's possible. There. I mean,
I'm not saying it's not possible. I'm saying I don't think. I can't get to a place in my head where there's a database and that's storing the past and we can go back to it.
Well, you're right. I don't think it's storing the past. I think all time, there's some physics that suggests that all space and all time exists all at the same time together. So it's not like a record or a hard drive where we go back in time. It's like it all exists at the same time.
That sounds like some string theory problem.
I don't know. But here's the thing though, that maybe you might consider. If in your mind you can fold space, right? I think I heard you just say that, folding space doesn't seem like it's that as far of a stretch as folding time, if I heard you right. Well, if you agree,
because I think time is constant. time. I don't necessarily connect time with space. This is one thing I've always had a hard time with. I think time is that constant that permeates. Is time is fundamental. So you're really folding the space, not necessarily time.
But just
So,
remember, though, it's not space, or at least if you believe Einstein, it's not just space and it's not just time. It's space time.
I
So
know, but I still
I'm
can't.
just, you know,
Still
that,
can't
I'm
get my
saying,
head around the. I still
Yeah.
don't like. I still like the light being that sort of immovable barrier that you can't. You
yeah,
know, that okay.
Yeah.
I can grab me some space fabric, but I can't. You know, when I
Yeah.
fold it, I'm just going from this now to there now. The two nows met. Boom.
hmm
I,
and
I,
you're,
I understand time dilation though. I don't have a problem with time dilation. That's not what I'm talking about. But anyway, I don't
yeah,
think
man.
if we're here now and someone folded space time back and connected a wormhole with us, we're in our now. We're not in our past. They're not visiting our past. They're visiting our now. Right. So what you're telling me really is that it's not possible because if if someone did it now there and folded it over to visit us, then you're telling me that this is my past that they're visiting, and it's not. It's my now.
Yeah. It's always going to be somebody's now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, really, like, you know, and it's hard to get, and it might not be right? Like, I mean, if you have a ship and you're seeing it through a quantum echo and there's light coming through, it's my opinion that could be future. That could be the light from the future coming. Like, that's why it's nighttime and you see this big ball. You know what I mean? And so, and maybe that's right. Maybe it's not. You could be, totally
No,
right.
yeah,
Well,
I mean,
what do
that
you
could
think,
be
Grant?
right from that. Yeah, from that instance, that from there now they would be bringing whatever light with them that's sourced at that time, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have enough of a frame of reference, I think, of physics to maybe have I like to think of myself as an intelligent guy, but I don't have an intelligent opinion on this one. That's why I think everything is plausible. So I think it's not unrealistic to think that, is it when someone sees an anomalous object in the sky that is a reddish hue or reddish color, is that sunset from some on the other side of a wormhole coming through? Why couldn't it be? Possibly. I think it's all plausible.
Yeah, man. I hope, man, and I hope your FOIA requests. Like, what are your current FOIA requests? What are you juggling now?
Well, I'm still waiting on. So I submitted a FOIA request, US FOIA request to go after contracts for Battelle and Radiance Technologies to see if any of the US contracts that are with those entities have keywords that match reverse engineering, back engineering, anything that would show some form of evidence that there is a contract with those organizations that they're tasked with reverse engineering some form of technology. And then that would hopefully open up breadcrumbs to other FOIA requests and so on. So those ones I haven't heard back yet. I'm waiting. They'll probably be mid-year, I think, because there's a huge backlog. But a lot of my homegrown Australian FOIA requests are very much on, what is the Australian Department of Defence doing? What does it know? When did it know it about UFOs, UAP, with everything that's going on right now? Because still, unfortunately, the Australian Department of Defence, with everything that's happened in the US with these 4 shoot downs, the first time in 60 years or whatever that NORAD's been ordered to take something down, Australia is still not has still buried its head in the sand on the UAP topic, and they've the Chief of Air Force is saying that no, the US has not contacted us or engaged us on the UAP topic. When you have Ross Coulthart, his reporting is a direct contrast to that, saying that he's heard from his sources that the Australian Defence Attaché in Washington, D.C. has been approached by the UAP task force. So there is someone's telling a porcupine somewhere, and I'm trying to get to the bottom of it through my FOIA requests. But I'll be interesting to see what comes of these Battelle and Radiance technology requests. That's for sure. Hey, on that, I was going to ask you, Brad. In the Joe Rogan interview with Eric Weinstein, Eric Weinstein talked about this company called Renaissance Technologies. Have you heard of those in your travels, and that they've been this very successful organization time and time again? I don't know if you've come across those in your travels in the SEC or anything like that, but who's it called? It was, Renaissance Technologies. He referenced in his interview.
No, I mean, and what I do for the agency is essentially, I mean, I just manage all of the training. So all the mandatory training that the agency does, and, set up different training and stuff like that. So I have no role in a regulatory capacity or anything like that. So I don't have, I do have friends that investigate certain companies and things like that, but nothing, I don't have any, certainly don't have any non-public information about any of them or anything like that. I don't ask, about stuff, and, I don't have anything to really say or anything about that.
There's no stake in the game. Yeah.
No, I mean, like my work is pretty much just like, I just like do my job and then get back to what I really like doing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I just, I've got a great job. It's, telework, 9 to 5, get home when the kids get home, and
that's what it's all about.
Yeah. Like my job is really, people are like, oh, why aren't you, doing this or doing that? I'm like, man, I was like, my life isn't my work. You know what I mean? Like I like doing what I like doing. And so sort of, I don't think I got an easy job, but I got a job that's really, really easy. I can, focus on, because if you can do your job in your sleep, right, and it's not that tough and, whatever, then I don't have anything where I don't have any situation where I'm like coming home from the office going, oh, I had a hard day. I'm like, oh man, I had an easy day. I can't wait to, go do it.
That's why I wonder, how does someone like Elon Musk have, Elon Musk is a special brand of fish, but how does anyone like that have a real balanced family professional life? I don't think he can, with all of the eggs that he's got in so many different baskets. He lives a very, very different life to 99.9% of us,
Oh yeah, man, I worry about him. I really do. Like, can you imagine? Like, I think when you're an executive, you can just, I think at least what I would do, right? I would do like what Jesus did, right? I would pick 12 disciples and I would pour everything into them. I would empower them with everything. I would, protect them, train them, mentor them, all that kind of stuff. And I would send them out to, to run my companies and do the work, and I would tell them, I say, I want you to find great people, and I want you to have your own core of, disciples that you are investing in. That
it's difficult though, because I own a design build company, and I only do 2 or 3 custom projects a year because I can't let go. I got to design it. I got to go out and build it. I got to be there when we're framing, when we're doing the foundation. I got to be there when I can't, at some point it's hard to, you either have to be a huge successful company or you have to be a small. It's hard to have a medium-sized company, right?
Yeah.
And it's just difficult. It's hard to let go. And the older I've gotten, the more glad that I am, because it was easy to slow down. Now I'm like you, Brad. When I come home, I don't really have that much to do. It's pretty easy, and
you can leave work at work and you can enjoy having family life. Yeah.
I only put the amount of work on myself that I want to do, to get by, really, and because I love doing other things, and so it's difficult. And you can imagine Elon. Can you imagine him completely turning over SpaceX to, the guy works like 20 hours a day.
I don't know when he sleeps. I struggle on.
He must do some of that. He must do some. He's got Tesla, right? And then like Solar City, whatever, Tesla Solar, you know, the solar home business. And then he's got SpaceX, and he's got Twitter.
Boring.
And I mean, yeah, boring. So he, you know, I mean, I can't, he has got to have, and he, I don't know. I guess he keeps it a secret.
He does. Yeah,
He's got to have.
compare himself to him. I'm saying people like me have small companies, and people like him have huge companies. Because he does.
So could you ever do that? Could you ever nominate? Could you ever find if you know if you had you just say it in you to like?
No, I could. I mean, I've had offers to build
delegate.
100 house. You know, had to build 100 houses. I've got people always calling me. I got this 50 unit, 50 house subdivision I want you to build. I'm like, I have no interest in building 50. Because one of the first things I did when I first started.
That's a big project, man.
When I first started, when I was 19, I had this. He was a Jewish developer. Okay, so he handed me a set of drawings, and every other house we had to hold it up to the light, right? And because it was the same house all the way, all it was flip flopped, and it was different colors or whatever, different finishes, but it was the grind. It turned the whole industry into a grind, and I was like, you know what? I'm not getting into that. I'm going to do only custom work. You know, I just want to. You know, you kind of have to mold your industry to where you want it to be for you to a certain extent. You know, and I would never. No, you just kind of gave me PTSDs from the past over that. But yeah, no, I can imagine the same. But you see, this is kind of what I was talking about with Brandon. I see his passion actually not being Skinwalker Ranch. I see his passion being real estate and development work, and his his collection, the things that he collects. You know, if you study his Twitter, you'll realize that that's true, because those are the things that he wants.
That's what he talks about the most, isn't it?
Yeah, that's what he presents to people as I think you present what you want people to think about you. You know, and he's not tweeting about Skinwalker Ranch every day, you know. But
true. You know, that's true. It'd be interesting, you know. And plus, you know, you never know. You know, maybe his wife doesn't like it. You know what I mean? Or maybe, you know what I mean? You just never know.
Maybe
you never know why.
Yeah, the stigma is there. You know, maybe it's still there enough to keep it from being a professional thing. You know. Yeah. I take a lot of ribbing from my subcontractors and people. They make probing jokes all the time. You know, whenever I do these shows, you know, because it's I love the content. I love the idea and all that. I love hanging out with you guys, but you catch crap for it. You really do. You know, and I'm like, okay, you guys are going to be surprised when you find out we're not alone.
When I go find a different sub.
No, I only hire the best subs. But
at the same token, I think you'd be surprised how many, and I've certainly surprised me, how many people have spoken to that I don't know, that I've told them this is a topic that I have an interest and a passion for, and then they're actually genuinely curious and they want to learn more. Like, you know, if you I told this not so long ago, but I was traveling to Sydney last year to see my family, and I was going through the security checkpoint at the airport, and my bag got flagged, and the security checkpoint guy opened it up, and I was reading a book at the time on the Phoenix Lights, and the guy saw the cover and said, "Oh, that's the Phoenix Lights, that's the UFO stuff." And before we knew it, we were deep into a conversation for about 10, 15 minutes, just talking about the topic, just genuinely curious as to what the other person knew about it, what their thoughts were, and so on. So I think, we always do kind of, I think, stay safety in numbers and strength in numbers, but I think we surprise ourselves as to times when you talk with someone that you think might not have an interest or curiosity about the topic, that they actually end up do. So, but the stigma and the ridicule, you know, the X-Files music's always going to follow us around on this topic. I don't think that's going away anytime soon.
It is true when you take the prodding and you joke and you laugh along with them. Like when my subcontractors poke me and I say, and we laugh and go along, and I go along with it. they do start asking questions.
Yeah, they do.
Right. And one of the reasons I'm doing the show is to bring those types of people to people that watch my videos, which are used to me doing SketchUp, design build stuff. I sneak this in, and it helps. I hope it's helping with the relieve some of the stigma to see normal people not afraid to address the topic.
Yeah.
I just had a tooth pulled, and so I was under the gas, and somebody started asking me about stuff, and I started talking about how we're an exoplanet colony and blah 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 and all this, because I was just like, it's like somebody put a nickel in me, and I was just like whatever, and like then the nurses, the oral surgeon was like, he said that makes perfect sense. Like I was talking about some of that other stuff, and he was like, he was like right there, and I was like, you just say that to everybody who's under the gas, don't you? And he was like, well, yeah, I really mean it this time. And then like his assistants came up and they're like, what's your podcast? Like, like writing it down. My brother wants to need to hear that, So it's like real people that don't have an agenda, who are just organic and regular people. I think those people are interested. People who are somehow, predisposed or whatever, or, whatever they, expect ridicule or, I don't know. I'm not very sensitive to that, but the regular, ordinary people who, if it, comes out of me, like, I don't know, man, they're interested.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm not sensitive to it either. They know that's why they can give me a hard time, and we laugh.
Ain't gonna hurt your feelings.
Yeah.
What about you, Grant? Are you in the closet when it comes to
no?
work?
I was initially, like when when I started getting back into this topic, because I've always followed it as a kid, but I always kind of kept it private to myself. But then when I started getting deep into it, and again, I always have to send my thanks to Luis Jimenez for kind of getting me off my ass and getting me in the game and engaging my elected representatives on this topic. And that was really what I started doing early on. And since I started doing that, engaging folks that we elect into positions of leadership and authority, I've kind of just don't give an F anymore about what people think. Like I just tell them, look, believe it or not, this is what is actually happening in the world. The U.S. government has had UFOs exist. You can believe it or not, but this is something that I'm interested in. If you're interested to learn what I've got, my thoughts on it or my perspectives are, I can share it with you. But yeah, the defense mechanism that people have by just laughing off the topic or giggling at you, it doesn't really affect me anymore. It used to, because no one wants to be judged, right? But I think I'm kind of like what you said, Brad. You don't really care if people believe the sonic gravity theory of everything or not. It doesn't really matter if you get more people on board with your idea, because in your heart and soul it's you know it to be true, what you're doing, what you're pursuing. So I think it matters less to you what other people think, the more you believe in what it is you're doing or what you're pursuing.
I'm with you.
I think people need to be more open-minded. I remember when I started first talking to Brad about his theory, I was like, what? And, then I'm like, we just need to be more objective. And I try to, that's my sort of, I don't know, I say that too much, but
no,
I say it to myself, okay, I'm going to clear my mind. I'm going to listen. It's just like when I see someone plants a picture of a UFO on Twitter, I say, what is that? I don't say that's an alien. I say, what is that? Right. And so I think more people should be more open-minded and just give people a chance, give people a chance to speak their mind. And then you let your own intuition go to work. That's what I do.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. And I think, you got to give people space to disagree with you. I have to give people space to disagree with me. If they disagree with me, that's cool. Like, I'm not trying to.
Well, I like.
I'm not trying to convince anybody
about you. Yeah.
That's
one thing that immediately attracted me to Alexei, and people don't understand this. Sometimes when I first met Alexei, he would just smile. And I'm like, okay, I know what you're smiling. I know what you're saying. You're smiling because I'm saying something different, But it's interesting though. He wouldn't argue. He wouldn't debate you. He would just ease you into it, And you're sort of the same way with me, Brad. And I appreciate that.
Well, I appreciate that. I think you tolerate me, and I really appreciate getting to come.
It's not tolerating. I actually love the intellectual stimulation of different theories. Yeah. I mean, it would be kind of boring if we literally had everything figured out. I think, it would be what are we living for? We already know.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's like you're never going to, and this is the whole thing with like my theory of everything and all that. Like I'm starved. I just recently got into like some DMs with an actual physicist from NASA, and this is the first time it's ever happened. It felt like, okay, I got to be really nice and make sure I don't say something mean or, whatever. Like I want to make sure I'm on my best behavior and I'm sensitive. And so I was, trying to, discuss with him, and I really wanted him to come in with me with some meat and say, well, look at this theory and blah, blah, blah. And this is where it's like probably wrong, but I didn't really get any of that. And so I was like, okay, like, come on, like, how about some criticism? And I was just like, well, did you, you know what I mean? It just wasn't there. And, but I wanted it. I was like, dude, I would really like somebody give me some, like a real issue. Like some of your listeners, like had said things like, well, I remember, was it, I don't know if it was people I find interesting, but I remember it was Christina Gomez. Yeah. And she said something like really sharp, like, well, how is it possible that it's time travel if it's like, it was Carl Vibe Show. And he was like, how could you possibly be like, looking through time and have it be, on Earth if we were physically, 50 years ago or 50 years in the future, the sun is screaming toward, around the Milky Way, and the Milky Way is headed to Andromeda,
constantly moving throughout the
galaxy. So how is it that you could possibly be looking at the future on Earth or what have you? And I was like, well, here's the thing. That's a great point. And if space-time is fundamental, right, then I can't be right. That's just a very sharp criticism. If space-time is fundamental, which I don't think it is, I think consciousness is fundamental. And where your consciousness is the anchor point for everything. Or maybe gravity is. I'm not really sure. Hard to say. But bottom line is, I think it's probably consciousness.
You could simplify that and just say observer,
Well, yeah, exactly. But I think it's consciousness. But it's interesting, though, because I've seen it twice now, the Eric Weinstein thing when he was talking to Joe Rogan, he says he thinks gravity is fundamental. He says that in there. And he thinks that, gravity is the observer or something, which might be plausible. But I'm not really sure if I agree with it. But I think it's plausible and it's interesting, and it would be consistent because it's either consciousness or that, but it can't be space-time. But that's the sharpest criticism from Christina Gomez that I've ever got. And it was delicious, and I want somebody to come say, hey, look, this is,
you want more of that.
Yeah. More of that. Cause that just makes you smarter.
It makes you smarter. Arguing the same thing I'm arguing, that it's now, like if you're folding space-time over this, there's a now here and a now there in the church,
Yeah, it's a valid criticism.
It can't be me in the future that you're folding over to meet me now. That's the paradox.
But the Einstein-Rosen paper says that it's two sheets that are identical. So it's in the sheet, it's like, the slices of cheese. He says two sheets of essentially the exact same space. It's just in a different time. That's what the ER paper says.
It's it looks like two sheets up here.
Yep.
Right, but it's connected. They're connected at the bottom.
Sure, but if you think of that sheet right there, that sheet is your house. That sheet is your house from last year, this year, next year, following year. And so if you take your house, which is that space, your house, and fold it You're still in your house at 2 different times. So
I don't
that's
know where,
what
I don't know
see what I
where
mean?
he gets. I don't know where he gets this gravity, because gravity is just a product of matter interacting with
the Higgs field.
space time. It's not.
Yep.
Gravity itself isn't fundamental. I don't get that.
I don't know. I mean, that's that's not.
You wouldn't have gravity if you didn't have mass.
It's true.
Right?
Yeah.
Well,
hand in hand.
Right.
Well,
you can have space time without matter.
Well, the Higgs field though is there's a vacuum energy density of 246 is the consensus. I think it's negative 246. So even if there's no, at least in physics, if the Higgs field is gravity, then you don't need mass to have gravity. Because remember, gravity is an applied acceleration, right? It's not a function of mass, because like if you take a vacuum and you have a feather and you have like a weight and you drop it, they go at the same speed. So it's an applied acceleration. Now, of course, if there's air, then the feather's buoyant.
Yeah, but if you have no feather or the baseball, there's no reaction, is my point.
That's true. But remember that gravity isn't a force. Gravity is applied acceleration.
Right.
Because so nothing might technically accelerate.
But gravity
right?
warps space-time. Space-time doesn't warp gravity. Gravity warps space-time.
Well, energy warps space-time.
The energy from the matter.
Yes.
Warps. Yeah.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
I think energy is what warps space-time.
Yeah.
Yep.
Which derives from the matter.
And gravity, and anytime you have sort of energy, mass energy or what have you, you have gravity. And so is gravity warping the space-time, or is the energy warping the space-time? It's hard to say, but I think there's a plausible argument either way that it is. It's the energy.
The reason I think that space and time were fundamental is because I believe our universe, the ingredients for our universe, were blown into the space at the at what some people call the Big Bang. That there was space there that was blown into. So that's what my intuition tells me anyway.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's plausible. So I think that what happens is when a star collapses, it's like 1 million miles wide, and it collapses down to nothing. It's like it's like a ice skater. She jumps up in the air when she does a triple action, and she pulls her arms in, she spins up really fast. So when a huge star that's like already got angular momentum crushes down, it's like a light speed axle. And I think if you do the math on it, it's on my sonic gravity theory of everything. If you do the math, when that thing rotates, a donut of it could accelerate past the speed of light. When that happens, I think it goes back in time. And when nothing can accept energy back in time, right? Because there would have to be enough gravity to balance the mass energy. So it goes all the way back before the beginning of time. And then there's nothing there. And the only space there, I think, is the space that the star brought with it when it went back in time. And so you have only the space that was in that star plus the mass that's occupying that space. So essentially all of the space is infinitely dense. It's covered in all matter and mass. And I think what happens is you just get essentially matter, antimatter annihilation of all of the core of that star. And then you get that massive Big Bang explosion, and it's inflating the space because now there's no space there. It's just void. And so the weak nuclear force and all the forces are in the space, all the DNA of the universe, so to speak. And so you just get a Big Bang that just, inflates, and now you get a whole new universe.
We need to have a show just on this, because this is the most, to me, that sort of beginning is one of the most fascinating things to me.
Right?
But it's 9 o'clock already. Dang.
Man, 3 hours. It's like
3 hours went by just like that.
I think we're trying to chase Joe Rogan hitting the 4L mark.
We've had him for 4 hours before. My problem is tonight I got some homework. I do have to revise some drawings for this guy tomorrow. So I'm going to have to.
I think my daughter's waiting for me for some playtime. But
So thank you thanks for the amount of time that both of you gave. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure, man.
Man, I love coming here.
Great to have a chat with you guys. Yeah.
We'll have to get together again sometime. I've often
Grant,
wanted
you've
to
been
have
doing
like
those rounds too, man. You're everywhere.
I'm putting stuff out there. I'm trying to keep up to date with what's going on. So, you know,
That's
Well, I hope
awesome.
you'll come back sometime, Grant. I hope
sure,
I didn't
totally.
hog the stage too much.
No.
I
Well,
tend to
this
get
is what.
I tend to get excited about things and talk and
See, I've said this before that I mean, very much when it comes to the UAP topic, have been a sponge. But when it comes to, quantum gravity, quantum flight, consciousness, all these things that you guys and Brad and Alexi have been talking about, and what form part of your submissions for PACE for TOE, this is when I usually tend to speak less and listen more and just absorb and be a sponge and take it in. So the more, and I truly believe that if you converse with people that are smarter than you or are educated in a topic that you're not, it brings you up a level as well. So, if you play basketball with someone that's better than you, you're going to play better as well.
You want me to tell you a secret, Grant? That's been my whole goal for this PiFi show. I keep thinking if I have a bunch of smart people around me, somehow I will be able to absorb some of the knowledge.
True.
And I think that just by talking to other people and getting, because if everybody has the same perspective, right? Everybody thinks the same. You're in your echo chamber, right? You have all the same blind spots. You make all the same mistakes. You believe all the same lies. You know what I mean? And so it's like I really like diversity and like hearing other people. Really, like you said, like I try to be more like you, Tony, and just like try to, okay, I think that's crap, but I'm gonna listen. I'm gonna try hard, and I'm gonna don't say, well, that's stupid. You know what I mean? Because like I don't know, I just feel like if we all thought the same and were the same, whatever, we'd have all the same weaknesses. And I think that's the trouble with science, is that everybody's quacking like a duck and everybody thinks the same thing as pseudoscience, and everybody is, if you don't have, I mean, and it's like, it's like animals, right? If you have all the same, if you're all inbred, right? You don't turn out as healthy as a healthy mutt. I want to be like an intellectual mutt.
Science needs to go back to being more like British Parliament than
or Korean Parliament. Have you seen those guys will fight? Those guys fight. That's awesome.
They'll go at it.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
And
Thanks for having me on, Tony.
We'll stay in touch and we'll get together again sometime. Thank you.
Yeah. Take it easy, Brad. Great to chat with you.
See you, Grant.
See you guys.
All right, guys.
All the best.
Bye for now.
Bye.
Cheers.
All right. Thanks, everybody. And awesome. Thanks for everybody in the chat. Sometimes I get caught up in the content and not keep up with it very well, but you guys are smart out there. So I try to stay in touch with you. Anyway, thanks again. I hope you'll join us for our next PiFi, which hopefully will be Bernardo Kastrup. Looking forward to that. See you guys.